Lord of Mysteries. Survival from the Secret Doll Chapter 286 to 303. Chapter 286. 285 Professional Ritual Magic Level Test. Ruin, Tingen City, 32 Red Rose Street, Blackthorn Security Company. The brass desk lamp on the oak desk reflected the slightly aged ink on the newspaper placed on the desk. Klein held a fountain pen and sat behind the oak desk. The pen in his hand smudged a small ink stain next to the news headline, Extra. Extra, the final result of the Clover incident, and he was slightly lost in thought. After performing a dream divination for Anna and interpreting that her fiancé might have met with disaster, it now seems the outcome hasn't progressed to the worst-case scenario. Klein put down his pen, rubbed the newspaper in his hand slightly with his fingertips, pondered for a moment, and just as he was about to get up, there was a knock on the office door. "Please come in," Klein said. Klein. It was Cohen Lee who knocked on the door. The slightly short Night Watchers member's face was slightly flushed. Miskatonic University is holding a special lecture at Tingen University. The captain asked me to tell you that we can find other teammates to swap shifts for this afternoon's duty. Klein was startled, then got up. "Is that so?" Yes, that's right. "We can leave in a moment," Cohen Lee said. "I found Leonard. Mr. Old Neil said he can cover your afternoon shift. Shall we go now?" "Wait a moment." Under Cohen Lee's gaze, Klein tidied up some documents spread out on the desk and the newspaper he had just read in the office. As a top student from Tingen University who graduated with degrees in history and languages, most of Klein's time within the Tingen City Night Watchers was spent translating ancient texts and organizing relevant historical materials. As a support Sequence 9, during his time at Blackthorn Security Company, Klein rarely encountered high-risk missions, except for the initial few instances involving the Antigonus family notebook, where he had to participate. Other than his daily shifts guarding the Channy's Gate, there were basically no dangerous tasks for him. After chatting with Old Neil, Klein, Cohen Lee, and Pedigree, who happened to have worked at Tingen University, jointly boarded a carriage. The carriage slowly passed through Tingen City's central square. Cohen Lee slightly lifted the curtain and could see people coming and going along the commercial street. At this time, newsboys were shouting extras of the Tingen Morning Post, a scene of prosperity. Closing the curtain, Cohen Lee sighed. "This is the third time I've taken this exam. Honestly, this is really difficult." "Pedigree, how did you pass the level 2 exam on your first try?" "Perhaps it's because I'm a wizard. This exam favors beyonders with high inspiration and strong spirituality. Generally speaking, these people are much better at applying and using ritual magic than those who aren't good at similar situations, like hunters, for example. But I'm not bad either. I feel like I'm about to finish digesting the Midnight Poet potion." Cohen Lee muttered. According to Klein's understanding, the professional ritual magic level test is divided into two parts. One part is a written exam, which assesses the candidate's professional knowledge, including the comprehensive application of knowledge from Compendium of Semiotics, Overview of Rituals, 1,000 Usable Materials, Arrangement and Application of Honored Names, etc. The exam paper is somewhat similar to the comprehensive arts and science papers Klein took during his college entrance exam before transmigrating. Of course, using divination methods like dream divination to cheat is not allowed. There will be examiners specifically watching out for these people who like to use unorthodox methods. However, if they cheat flawlessly, that's a different matter. The second part assesses practical application ability, which can also be called an interview. It requires candidates to use their sequence abilities and various ritual magic combinations to solve problems. Based on the actual situation and considering the candidate's adaptability and use of abilities, examiners will be specifically responsible for recording each candidate's performance and scoring accordingly. The content of the first part of the exam is more or less the same, but the content of the second part is different each time. For example, the content of my last second round exam was a city full of zombies. Speaking of this, Cohen Lee's body shivered, as if he had thought of something extremely terrifying. That scene left him with a considerable psychological trauma. That city is called something like Raccoon City. Goddess above, it was full of mutated monsters that couldn't be killed. My exam content back then was called the Ishimura. It's said to be based on a spaceship heading to an alien galaxy. I don't know if that's true or false. Pedigree recalled his exam content, and then said to Klein, the captain also has a level 2 ritual master certificate. His exam content was said to be a planet called LV-426. There's a type of monster there that parasitizes the human body, gestates within it, and bursts out when mature. In short, they are all very bizarre exam subjects. Klein opened his mouth. This. There are also things like human skin balloons that burst with a poke, a mansion full of paper figures, a dusty town called Silent Hill, strange videotapes, children mimicking cat sounds, fallen nuns, bloody moving skeletons, supersonic statues. I feel like there is indeed an exam syllabus, but the content of the syllabus is extensive. Although there are repeated parts in each exam, the details are significantly changed each time. Sometimes, 2 or 3 previously appeared exam questions are even pieced together. Cohen Lee grimaced and sighed. That's how I failed the exam the time before last. Klein, do you know the feeling of despair from being chased and slashed by a pile of flesh and blood monsters, with a human head balloon shaped like your own head floating above you, and that balloon is preparing to hang you? Cohen Lee, stop talking. Klein numbly wanted Cohen Lee to shut up. He suspected that this senior not only copied Resident Evil but also copied everything like Silent Hill, The Nun, Junji Ito, SCP-173, Alien, and so on. Senior Transmigrator, if you can't copy, then don't. Even if you copy, don't copy so comprehensively, okay. He could already imagine that scene. He wanted to quit. However, even for the same exam question, the content, or rather, the conditions for passing, are different for Level 1 Ritual Masters, Level 2 Ritual Masters, and Level 3 Ritual Masters. Pedigree added, Cohen Lee, you and Klein are just low sequence beyonders, so you can only apply for Level 3 Ritual Master. Let's take your last exam content as an example. If it were just a Level 3 Ritual Master exam, then your ultimate goal would only be to escape that polluted city, that's it. Indeed, Cohen Lee recalled. My last exam question was indeed to escape Raccoon City. Speaking of this, Cohen Lee suddenly wanted to hug his knees and cry for a while. As a result, when I was about to run out, I encountered a large group of zombies and was immediately kicked out of the examination hall. Actually, the specific term for that thing should be zombie. Klein's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. But for the Level 2 Ritual Master exam, it should become understanding the reason for the city's pollution and purifying it to a certain extent to alleviate the pollution. The content of the Level 1 Ritual Master exam is probably to completely resolve the abnormal situation in that city and catch the mastermind. After all, the application standard for Level 1 Ritual Master is demigods from Sequence 1 to Sequence 3. Pedigree said, of course, if you apply for Level 3 Ritual Master but complete the content for Level 2 Ritual Master, then your final evaluation result will, to a certain extent, be more inclined to promote you one level up. Then, based on your written exam score and the evaluation criteria for the second exam, a comprehensive assessment will determine whether you can obtain a Level 2 Ritual Master certificate instead of a Level 3 Ritual Master certificate. There's such a thing. Cohen Lee seemed to be hearing this for the first time and didn't know much about it. Does that mean if I meet the requirements for Level 1 Ritual Master, I can also become a Level 1 Ritual Master? Pedigree pondered for a moment and smiled. Theoretically speaking, yes. But in those exams, the monsters that a Level 1 Ritual Master needs to face are likely at the demigod level, and might even reach the Sequence 2 or Sequence 1 level. Cohen Lee, are you sure you can handle that? Cohen Lee, alright, he overestimated himself. Pedigree's gaze fell on Klein, and he found it a bit strange. Klein, why are you sweating so much? Klein smiled awkwardly but politely at Pedigree, and Cohen Lee found an excuse for himself, and brushed it off. He couldn't possibly say that just thinking about it made him want to back out, right? Senior Transmigrator, what the heck did you do? The carriage drove all the way towards Tingen University, and soon, they arrived at Tingen University. The undergraduates at Tingen University were on summer vacation now. Except for some struggling graduate students, there weren't many people in the entire university, making it feel quite empty and suitable as a venue for lectures. After Klein, Pedigree, and Cohen Lee got off the carriage, they saw people entering Tingen University's gate one after another at this time. Are those people from the Storm Church? Cohen Lee seemed to recognize some of them and looked at Pedigree with some surprise. Indeed. Pedigree looked over following Cohen Lee's gaze. He seemed to have seen an acquaintance and was also a bit surprised. Is there something wrong with people from the Storm Church coming here? Pedigree, Cohen Lee, why are you both so surprised? Klein noticed something was off and was a bit curious. As an exam recognized by the orthodox churches, it shouldn't be strange for people from the Storm Church to come, right? It's not exactly surprise, Cohen Lee said hesitantly upon hearing this. After all, I haven't seen anyone from the Storm Church come for the exam in a long time. The people in their church are too hot-tempered and can't calm down to study properly. A few years ago, after not a single person's written exam score exceeded 60 points for several consecutive years, they seem to have completely given up. Pedigree added, currently, the number and proportion of ritual masters within all Orthodox churches, including the Eternal Blazing Sun, God of Knowledge and Wisdom, Earth Mother, and Church of the God of War, which are not in ruin, have been slowly increasing in recent years. But only the Storm Church has always been up and down, 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 down. Just when one finally passed, all the Storm Church Beyonders who came for the exam the following year were swept away, successfully achieving a 0 pass rate for the church, an almost unbelievable result. They seem to have been protesting that Miskatonic University's exam questions are too difficult, the volume is too large, and demanding that the percentage of points for the second round of exams be increased and the rule, failure in either round of the exam means elimination, be abolished. Of course, the outcome is obvious. Miskatonic University responded, "Why don't you go back and practice more?" and threw them to the neighboring Khoi University for further study, refusing unreasonable demands and adhering to good exam rules. Klein was also a bit speechless upon hearing this. However, this result was quite consistent with his stereotype of the Storm Church. There are also people from the Moses Ascetic Order. The three entered Tingen University together. When they saw someone familiar, Pedigree would instruct Klein and Cohen Lee beside him. That one who looks very beautiful, with an abnormal sense of beauty, should be a witch, a member of the witch sect. Beyonders from the Earth Mother Church like to weave branches and flowers into crowns and wear them on their heads, making them easily recognizable. That one over there is. Seeing Pedigree fall silent, Klein looked curiously at where Pedigree was gazing. Standing there was a person wearing a hood, whose face couldn't be seen. At this moment, Cohen Lee subconsciously moved closer to Pedigree, showing strong hostility towards the person wearing the hood. "Stay away from him, Klein, Cohen Lee." Pedigree's voice turned cold. "An Aurora Order Divine Messenger. Isn't he afraid of being caught by us and locked behind the Chinese gate immediately after leaving Tingen City?" An Aurora Order Divine Messenger. Klein was startled and quickly remembered the secret orders he had learned about. The Aurora Order worships an evil god called the True Creator. They believe all things have spirituality and are skilled at praying to their Lord through bloody sacrifices. Throughout the Ruined Kingdom, they have initiated multiple riots and attacks and are the #1 evil god believers that the three Orthodox churches need to suppress. Seemingly sensing their unfriendly gazes, the figure in the hood slightly turned their head, revealing a delicate jawline. He, or she, saw Pedigree, Cohen Lee, and Klein, and slightly bowed, as if greeting them. "Good afternoon, three of you." It was a man's voice. "Mr. B, what are you here for?" Pedigree had clearly recognized who this Aurora Order Divine Messenger was by his voice. "Of course, I'm here for the exam," the man called Mr. B by Pedigree smiled slightly. "After all, this is the oracle given to us by the Lord." Chapter 287, 286 Principle. Your Church of the Lord sent you. What do you want to do? Are you really just here for the exam? Why are you so wary? Mr. B revealed his handsome eyes and brows, possessing an unnatural beauty that seemed capable of drawing in human souls, causing Klein and Cohen Lee to feel a momentary trance the instant they saw him. Mr. B's smile seemed to have the ability to penetrate souls. Klein's spiritual intuition told him that this smile was likely infused with some Beyonder ability, a power capable of charming others. As someone who had received formal mysticism education and was one of the night watchers in Tingen City, Klein had a certain understanding of the names and general abilities of the potions below the demigod level for various pathways and sequences. For example, the secret order known as the Aurora Order controls the listener pathway and believes in the evil god, the True Creator. Sequence 5 of the listener pathway is called Shepherd. Sequence 5, Shepherd. As the name suggests, Beyonders of this sequence are like shepherds tending the lambs for a god. Every shepherd can accommodate the Beyonder characteristics of other pathways, and even temporarily use the abilities of their victims. By shepherding these accommodated Beyonder characteristics and souls, every shepherd is not only a master of flesh and blood magic but also possesses various bizarre, hard to kill, and terrifying abilities hybridized from accommodating the Beyonder characteristics and souls of other pathways. This is a qualitative change, meaning Mr. B is at least a shepherd and has at least shepherded a sequence 6 from the witch sect, which is a hedonist witch. Cohen Lee's breathing quickened slightly, and he whispered, shepherds of the Aurora Order usually shepherd 5 to 6 souls. They are quite difficult to deal with and quite difficult to kill. Klein's heart sank slightly, and he and Cohen Lee stood silently behind Pedigree. Seeing that Pedigree's hostility showed no sign of lessening, the shepherd said slowly, relax, I can't do anything here. The existence of that one can send me back to the embrace of the Church of the Lord at any time. He smiled slightly, so you don't need to look at me like that, or be so wary of me. Just as I said, I'm really just here to, take the exam. The rule of silence in Tingen City also prevents me from brutally killing any guilty person here. Pedigree was silent for a moment. After Mr. B finished speaking, he seemed to have genuinely just greeted them. Once the greeting was done, he walked away, and no one stopped him. Let's go too, the auditorium is over there. Pedigree watched Mr. B's retreating back for a long time before speaking. Okay. They lifted their feet, heading in the same direction as Mr. B. Pedigree walked quickly. Klein could feel that Pedigree's mood wasn't quite right. He and Cohen Lee lagged slightly behind. Seeing Pedigree walking forward expressionlessly, Klein fell back a little, level with Cohen Lee, and then quietly asked Cohen Lee. Cohen Lee, Pedigree seems to really hate people from the Aurora Order. Did they do something? Compared to the Witch Sect and the Moses Ascetic Order, this wizard seemed to have an inexplicable, strong sense of animosity towards the Aurora Order from the moment they met. Pedigree's father died at the hands of a certain divine envoy of the Aurora Order. He wasn't a night watcher from Tingen City. While carrying out a confidential mission for the church, Pedigree's father encountered a divine envoy of the Aurora Order. The entire Night Watchers team was almost wiped out, and Pedigree's father also died at the hands of that divine envoy of the Aurora Order. Cohen Lee said softly, his eyes constantly looking at Pedigree's back not far away. At that time, Pedigree was only 6 years old. Later, his mother couldn't bear the blow and hanged herself after Pedigree's father's funeral. Pedigree was raised by Mr. Old Neil. After he became a Sequence 9 seer, he joined the Night Watchers. Klein opened his mouth, unsure what to say, then closed it. No wonder Pedigree's hostility towards the Aurora Order was much greater than towards other secret orders. If it were him, seeing the murderer who killed his father and indirectly caused his mother's death, he probably wouldn't have much reason either, right? But Tingen City has rules and its own set of laws that restrict the Beyonders here. Klein recalled what Mr. Old Neil had taught him before. For those who violate the rules, the Night Watchers, Punishers, and Investigators can punish and kill them, but if they haven't committed crimes within Tingen City that warrant death, we cannot easily act against them. Mr. Old Neil had sounded a bit wistful when he said this. Little Klein, you must be curious why such rules exist, right? Mr. Old Neil stirred the glass rod in his hand. He was mixing a true magical potion that could restore spirit and flesh. Tingen City is the city of miracles. Here, whether it's the Black Knight Church, the Storm Church, or the Artisan Church, members of secret orders, or wild beyonders, they can all enter. The trading rules and various laws here are contrary to the explicit laws of the Ruined Kingdom. Even the influence of the churches and the royal family can hardly have the final say in Tingen City. For wild beyonders and secret orders, Tingen City is not a particularly dangerous place. As long as they abide by the rules within Tingen City, then before it is proven that they are guilty, or have committed unforgivable crimes, violating laws and rules, we cannot use lynching against them, nor can we detain or execute them. Especially during the exam period, Cohen Lee whispered. At this time, as candidates for the professional ritual magic grade test, candidates cannot attack each other without reason if they haven't violated the rules. If things get out of hand, they might even be disqualified from the exam and permanently banned from taking it. Pedigree's reaction proved that although he knew Mr. B had not committed crimes under the nose of ruin or the church that warranted hanging or burning. Pedigree could not act, and had no way to act. Klein nodded and said nothing more. Cohen Lee also closed his mouth in due time. The two silently followed Pedigree to the auditorium of Tingen University. At this time, the auditorium of Tingen University, which could accommodate tens of thousands of people, already had quite a few people, and a steady stream of outsiders was entering from the east and west doors of the auditorium. Klein saw the Beyonders from the Earth Mother, the Witch Sect, and other orthodox churches and secret orders that Pettigrew had mentioned earlier. At the same time, he also saw many people dressed somewhat strangely, with styles very different from the North Continent, but whose facial features were somewhat similar to Mr. Azik's. They looked different from North Continent faces. Klein observed carefully for a moment before asking with some uncertainty, "Are those people from the South Continent?" Should be. Pettigrew, who had adjusted his emotions in a short time, glanced at the few South Continent people nearby whose clothing seemed out of place compared to everyone else. Then, he shifted his gaze to the few people standing not far from those South Continent individuals. Sitting there were several men and women with stiff, expressionless faces. They lacked spirituality, giving off a feeling of being lifeless, not truly alive. The Rose School from the South Continent has also sent people. Rose School. Klein also looked in that direction, deep in thought. Living corpses. There should also be vengeful spirits. The Temperance faction of the Rose School has been hunting down members of the Hedonist faction in recent years. It is said that most members of the Hedonist faction have hidden in the countries of the North Continent. They are participating in the exam, likely with the intention of using certain rituals in ritual magic after obtaining their qualification certificates to help them hunt down those Hedonist faction members. The South Continent indeed had traces of its existence in various historical records and documents. The death of the Fourth Epoch once ruled a kingdom on the South Continent. But currently, information about it is quite scarce, including intelligence about the Rose School, which was originally one of the secret orders on the South Continent. Even among official Beyonder organizations, records about the Rose School are limited to the results of the conflict between their Temperance faction and Hedonist faction, and some crimes committed by the Hedonist faction in the North Continent, without involving issues related to the South Continent. Klein recalled something he had seen in Rosal the Great's diary. It mentioned that Rosal the Great had once attempted to go to the South Continent but was turned back by the abnormal weather in the stormy sea between the North and South Continent. I wonder if the Great Emperor ever successfully landed on the South Continent. Perhaps he did, but I haven't seen the corresponding diary entries yet. Klein mused, then shifted his gaze away from those living corpses. He then saw Mr. B, who had greeted them earlier. Beside him was a lady wearing a white robe. Klein found the lady somewhat familiar. Had he seen her before at the entrance of St. Peter's Hospital? Klein didn't dare to let his eyes linger on the two obviously abnormal secret order members. His gaze naturally swept past them as he continued to observe his surroundings. Inside the bustling, somewhat noisy auditorium of Tingen University, Klein also saw Beyonders from the Eternal Blazing Sun, the God of Craftsman Church, and other Orthodox churches. Most of them were gathered in their own circles. Some of them were young and green, occasionally glancing around at the people. Many of them had expressions of unconcealed surprise and astonishment on their faces. They look like newcomers taking this kind of exam for the first time. "You're here too." Just then, Klein heard a somewhat familiar voice. "Tang, you're here too." "Yeah, that's right, came to see the excitement. This is Owen, my older brother." Only then did Klein see the tall figure standing beside Tang. The man looked at Klein, his face expressionless, but he extended his hand in a friendly manner. "Hello, Owen Eggs." "Hello, Klein Moretti." The two shook hands quite cordially. The tall man named Owen then greeted Tang and left. "Why didn't Mr. Azik ever mention you had an older brother?" "Ah, that, he went to the South Continent to do business a few years ago. His work here in the North Continent wasn't working out, so he went to the South Continent supposedly for business, but he got swindled out of a large sum of money by the natives there," Tang said with a look of deep regret. "Why bring up family misfortunes? Klein, what great resentment." But thinking about it, it makes sense. Just as Klein was about to say something else, the auditorium doors closed automatically from the outside without anyone pushing them. The mineral lamps hanging from the ceiling inside the doors suddenly extinguished. At this moment, the sound within the auditorium seemed to be sucked away by something. Instantly, everyone stopped talking and looked towards the podium at the front of the auditorium. There, on the podium slightly higher than where they were, a figure rapidly materialized from nothing under everyone's gaze, as if passing through the dimensions of time and space, quickly taking shape. The lights automatically focused on the figure that appeared on the auditorium podium. Klein first saw a black top hat emerge from the void. Immediately after, this black silk top hat was grasped by a long finger wearing a white glove. It was placed on top of slightly faded black, slightly curly hair. Appearing on the podium was a young gentleman. Under the light, one could see a face with distinct features and soft contours. The young man had a pair of light brown eyes and a composed demeanor. He wore a well-fitting black tailcoat outfit the same color as the top hat on his head. He was like the greatest work of art, newly adjusted. Just one glance was enough to see a unique aura of a high-ranking individual, accumulated over a long history. Under the concentrated light of the mineral lamps, the person seemed to sparkle slightly, instantly becoming the center of everyone's attention. Klein gazed at the person, feeling slightly lost in thought. Klein guessed who this person was. Good afternoon. Wearing white gloves, Nicholas Flamel took off the top hat on his head and bowed very politely to everyone in the auditorium. The hat spun 2 or 3 times in the air until it was held over his heart. Then, this black silk top hat was placed back on his head by this angel. Under everyone's gaze, Nicholas Flamel smiled and said, "I've seen quite a few familiar faces in the crowd. I believe many of you already know and are familiar with me. However, to accommodate some children who don't know me yet, please allow me to take a moment to introduce myself. I am Nicholas Flamel, principal of Miskatonic University, and also the designer and witness of this professional ritual magic grade test. Good afternoon, candidates. Chapter 288, 287 Past Exam Questions." After a simple self-introduction, Nicola raised his hand, and with a finger in a white glove, he suddenly snapped his fingers in the air before everyone. On the ceiling of the auditorium hall, which was 7 or 8 people high, countless brilliant lights abruptly appeared. That was a scorching warm sun, a crimson moon, and countless faint, yet innumerable stars. They echoed each other, adorning the auditorium ceiling, and after night fell, this vast, seemingly endless starry sky was moved from outside into the Tingen University auditorium. Then, the innumerable stars rapidly magnified, and both the sun and moon seemed to lose their light. They fell from the extremely distant sky, bringing light and heat, bringing the fiery tail of sparks and friction like asteroids streaking through the atmosphere, about to smash into the people in the auditorium. Professional Ritual Magic Level Test. The stars instantly filled the space above everyone's heads. They burst open, and the stones contained within transformed into various scenes. Everyone's gaze was first awestruck by the vast spectacle, then fixed, unblinking, on the innumerable scenes displayed in midair. On a snow-capped mountain, a group of hikers dressed warmly looked up at the extremely high mountain peak. Mount Everest Snow Mountain Trip, 2, Level Ritual Magic Level Test, Second Round Examination Hall. Avalanches blocked the road, and living corpses walked alongside. In the open-air graveyard of Mount Everest, over 200 corpses were resurrected due to the mountain's mutation, pursuing the test takers. Each of them was dehydrated and stiffened, yet possessed immense strength. They were like fish in water during avalanches, fearless of the cold and most beyonder abilities targeting flesh. Because there was no spirit, even the most powerful spiritualists and marionettists could not control their corpses. The vast expanse of white snow made it extremely easy to lose sense of direction, altitude, and oxygen. In the midst of the avalanche, someone shouted something loudly, but his voice was simply too weak. The pyromancer's flames were easily extinguished by the irresistible natural disaster. In an avalanche, the corpses in cold weather gear were like fish in water, rapidly moving towards the test takers who were shouting and fleeing. Some were completely buried by the avalanche snow under more than 10 meters of snow. Some were caught by those living corpses, their dehydrated, skeletal arms gripping their hands tightly, and the hands of the caught test takers also began to constantly transform in the direction of those monsters. Test taker buried by snow, health reduced to below 20, breaking through mental defense line, removed from examination hall. Test taker assimilated by monster, mental value reduced to below 20, breaking through mental defense line, removed from examination hall. Quote. Examination hall closed. This, 2, Level Ritual Magic Level Test Examination Hall, Mount Everest Snow Mountain Trip Passing Rate, 17%. On the edge of a town covered in falling ash, a carriage stopped by a cliff. The few people who got off the carriage looked at the ash-filled town behind them, their faces extremely solemn. Silent Hill, 2, Level Ritual Magic Level Test, Second Round Examination Hall. An ancient city-state with ash drifting, the ground beneath was ignited by inextinguishable flames. The wronged souls who died here could not break free for thousands of years, and their powerful resentment spawned a dual world, inner and outer. The surface was a peaceful, serene town, but when the bell rang, the inextinguishable flames in the flipped-out inner world would swallow everything. In the scene, infant-like children crawled all over a building, a monster with its chest wide open sprayed sulfuric acid, and spiders stitched together from doll limbs, torsos, and heads rushed towards the test takers who had fled here, pursued by monsters. Someone was mercilessly abandoned by their teammates. The spider monster assembled and stitched together from doll limbs, torsos, and heads pressed down on the test taker's head, ignoring the person's freely flowing snot and tears. The head held by the spider monster's front legs approached the test taker, and the test taker's eyes became vacant, their skin taking on a peculiar luster characteristic of dolls. Test taker assimilated by monster, about to become the opponent's puppet, mental value reduced to below 20, breaking through health defense line, removed from examination hall, test ended. Quote. Examination hall closed. This, 2, level ritual magic level test examination hall, Silent Hill passing rate, 21%. An enormous campus, with students coming and going. Test takers, holding student IDs, were on their way to the principal's office under the guidance of a senior student. Spiritualist Ghost School, 1, level ritual magic level test, second round examination hall. During the day, they were enthusiastic students, but at night they would tear off their own heads. Bloody nails in the dormitory, bizarre paintings in the art room, Sephora trees by the lake with human heads, humans here were defined as trash. At night, a group of people in a hurry broke into the principal's office. Countless red pigments poured out of the office. The intruders narrowly dodged the contamination of those dark red, foul-smelling, and resentful pigments. One person flew above the entire school, and in an instant, a scorching sun with purifying power suddenly appeared. The sunlight was so dazzling that all the monsters and all the contamination in the entire school became illusory and transparent under the sun's illumination, about to disappear. But the red pigment surging from the principal's office continued to flow out, as if endless. Someone was shouting something loudly, seemingly reminding the angel of the sun pathway who had hung himself in midair of something, but his reminder was a little too late. A young man holding a paintbrush leisurely sketched the final stroke of the painting in his hand on his canvas. Subsequently, the sun was completely sealed within the painting. Test taker painted into the painting, suffered significant mental impact and contamination, mental value reduced to below 20, breaking through mental defense line, removed from examination hall, test ended. The monsters, evil spirits, and mental contamination in the school rioted. The frenzied monsters chased these well-known figures in the mysticism world all over the map, making them quite miserable. Ultimately, some were swallowed by the red pigment, and some revealed their mythical creature form, but were slapped into the ground by even more indescribable, incomprehensible monsters from the painting. Quote. Test taker health reduced to below 20, breaking through health defense line, removed from examination hall, test ended. Examination hall closed. This, 1, level ritual magic level test examination hall, spiritualist ghost school passing rate, 0%. A world where even the air was distorted, everything felt like something being constantly cooked in a steamer. On the dry seabed, a line of people wearing thick clothing, their faces unclear, were walking towards the distant city. Extreme temperature hell, 3, level ritual magic level test, second round examination hall. The ozone layer protecting the planet was damaged, and the surface temperature of the planet rapidly rose. Humans, animals, and plants suffered heavy casualties. All traces of human civilization seemed vulnerable under the extreme temperature. Here, fresh water was the most precious resource. One person walking on the seabed swayed and walked a few more steps, finally collapsing weakly. His teammates nearby saw this and reluctantly tried to take out fresh water from their backpacks, but the cup they took out was already empty, not a drop of water left. Test taker health reduced to below 20, breaking through health defense line, removed from examination hall, test ended. Here, even corpses are difficult to decompose because it is too hot. And here, not only the problem of extreme weather needs to be considered. Dry corpses crawled out with crackling sounds from residential buildings, from sewers, from ships, from the ground. They looked at the living test takers who could breathe and had blood, opened their toothless mouths, and rushed forward fearlessly. Test taker lost a large amount of blood, health reduced to below 20, breaking through health defense line, removed from examination hall, test ended. Examination hall closed. This, 3, level ritual magic level test examination hall, extreme temperature hell passing rate, 8%. One after another, shocking scenes continuously appeared in midair. Some transformed into giants, some became the sun and moon, some pulled open doors filled with mysticism profoundness, and some chanted incantations in a language that could leverage the power of nature. In the countless overlapping scenes, many people roared. They fought against those terrifying, indescribable, unspeakable distorted things. Mental contamination poured into the minds of everyone in the entire auditorium in a completely unrestrained manner. In an instant, someone couldn't help but vomit with a wah sound, but at this moment, no one found them disgusting, because the complete or incomplete mythical creature forms of demigods and monsters presented in those scenes, even just the impact of the visuals, was enough to turn their brains into paste, making them nauseous, painful, and unable to think. Someone's expression also worsened with the superposition of these layers of scenes. He wasn't dry heaving, but his eyes were vacant, his expression twisted, and saliva flowed from the corner of his mouth. Because he faced mythical creatures directly, even if only in images, it induced him, completely igniting the hidden risk of losing control. However, before this test-taker completely lost control, Nicola, standing on the podium, looked over with his faint gaze. This Angel King, the principal of Miskatonic University, slightly hooked his finger, and he stole the opponent's destiny of losing control. The test-taker who almost lost control rolled his eyes and fell straight down. He was quickly carried away on a stretcher by Tingen University medical staff who appeared beside him. These are some of the details and actual situations of the examinations they have conducted in the past 1,000 years, since the professional ritual magic level test began. The scenes still playing on the auditorium ceiling instantly turned back into one of the many stars adorning it, and they, along with the just dimmed sun and moon, collectively guarded a symbol formed by an open book, wheat ears, flowers, stars, curves and planes, and various complex mystical symbols, which symbolized Miskatonic University. When Nicola's voice sounded, the memories of the vast majority of people regarding the indescribable, incomprehensible, and utterly insane scenes they had just seen rapidly faded, leaving only basic emotional feedback like, so scary, so disgusting, and, I'm scared. Klein's steps were a little unsteady. Before Cornley and Pedigree on the side stepped forward to support him, he waved his hand at these two teammates, indicating that he was fine. But how could he be fine? Klein's expression was a little pale. As just a Sequence 9, he simply couldn't withstand that level of impact. However, Nicola Flamel was an angel who controlled error, fallacies, and loopholes. Losing control because of such a thing was impossible. Therefore, apart from the basic urge to vomit, Klein felt more of a strange sense of nostalgia. Although he hadn't transmigrated for long, it felt to Klein as if he really hadn't been home for a very, very long time. Therefore, seeing some familiar things again caused a psychological impact, shock, and nostalgia for Klein that far outweighed horror and terror. Just don't add scary and horrifying elements to everything, Senior Transmigrator. However, if that's the case, if the exam questions are Silent Hill, Ishimura, Raccoon City, and so on, as long as the main direction is correct, I should be considered an old player who has played through them in advance. This is the benefit of being a transmigrator. Sometimes their thoughts are indeed interconnected. It would be even better if the senior transmigrator didn't cause trouble. For example, maliciously changing the location of main items, then squatting there to filter whether any transmigrators come to pick up corpses based on memory and experience from games, novels, or movies. Klein. Wait, hold on. No, it can't be. Humans shouldn't, at least not. While Klein was brainstorming, Nicola looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar people in front of him and smiled slightly. In fact, and experience tell us that knowledge, at a certain moment, is the manifestation of power. Some of you are clergy of the Church of the Lord, some are members of secret orders, some are ordinary beyonders who stumbled into the mystic circle, some are newcomers. His gaze was gentle yet powerful, but in mysticism, before knowledge, you are equal and possess a learning ability that ordinary people do not. These things, one day, will become the most important amulet protecting you. Regarding this statement, the happiest people were naturally those from the Knowledge and Wisdom God Church. So that's why the Knowledge and Wisdom God Church is cooperating with you. Of course. Tang held a lollipop, watching Nicola's speech on the stage. Owen paused, then asked, "So, why did you call me back?" Tang. You've already taken the 1 level exam, 17 times. I've signed you up for this one. Prepare yourself to take it in a few days. Owen. Brother. Owen grabbed Tang's shoulder and leaned his head closer. Let's discuss this. How about we don't take the exam, or, remove the written part. How can you say that? Tang took out a monocle from the historical void and leisurely put it on his right eye socket. He raised an eyebrow and smiled. Besides, you've taken it so many times. It would be impolite not to pass the written test again. If you don't pass again, I'll be sad, collapse, go crazy, and then feed you the tyrant potion. The Lord of Storms stepped down from that position, and you go up. Tang's eyes curved, seemingly truly considering this possibility. Owen shivered, moved a little away from Tang, and rubbed his arm. This guy is really getting more and more sinister, especially with the things in these bizarre exams. Tang, why don't you go see a psychologist? You need to treat this illness quickly. Chapter 289, Chapter 288, Will he really not hit me? After this lecture ended, Klein, who was deep in thought and doubting life, was pulled into the history department office by Tang along with Cornley and Pettigrew. Because Tingen University was still on summer break, most of the history department professors had gone home, and the history department office was thus empty. Here, past exam questions. It's always good to go over these before the exam. Rosal the Great said that last-minute cramming might not be useful, but it will definitely give you spiritual comfort. Even if you can't pass the written part, afterward you can hypnotize yourself into saying, I tried my best, to relax your mind. This is the so-called placebo effect. Klein stared blankly at the thick stack of papers shoved into his hand. Why did he feel like Tang was so skilled at handing out exam papers? Shouldn't these things be confidential? He asked, a little confused. No, Tang replied casually, after you apply, just ask the person in charge of this at Tingen University. It's free. Pettigrew also said, the questions included in the usual materials are also real questions, but they aren't as systematic and official as those given by Tingen University. It's a good time to write them now. I see. Klein looked at the other person in the history department office. He had seen that person before in the auditorium. It was Mr. Ask's eldest son, Tang's older brother, Owen Eggs, who was said to have been swindled out of a large sum of money by the natives on the South Continent. Owen. Actually, you don't need to remember it that well. Owen was currently holding a black marker, huddled in a corner, his eyes blank and helpless as he looked at the words on the paper in front of him that he couldn't understand individually or strung together. He hadn't put pen to paper for a long time. He looked like a living person who was slightly dead. Seeing this, Tang casually grabbed a red pen from the nearest desk, then threw it, accurately hitting his own brother. Owen was almost scared into jumping up. Looking at Tang, who was smiling at him, Owen nodded with a stiff expression. Pull him away. Someone is trying to murder their own brother here. Don't be lazy, hurry up and do it. Oh, seeing that the thing in the corner finally started to squirm and wasn't playing dead anymore, Tang turned his head and looked at the three night watchers. Cornley hid behind Pettigrew, looking at the red pen stuck in the wooden desk not far away with a somewhat frightened expression. Do Beyonders of the Seer Pathway have such brutal arm strength? When he looked at those real exam papers, sometimes, he seemed to be in the same state as Tang's brother in the corner. No, he won't be beaten, right? He really won't be beaten, right? Don't worry, I won't hit you. Seeming to notice Cornley and Klein's somewhat stunned gazes, Tang smiled and rotated his wrist, then looked at Pettigrew. I remember, Pettigrew, you seem to have already passed grade 2 feet, right? Yes, I passed. Pettigrew turned around, looked at the two, trembling, members behind him, was silent for a moment, and sighed helplessly. Don't worry, even if you don't do these papers, he shouldn't hit you. He honestly excused Tang, because that's illegal. Cornley. Thank you, Pettigrew. He wasn't comforted at all. Owen, who was looking at the paper in the corner and then at the red pen that was only a few centimeters away from his hand. So for him, this is a family dispute. Hey, who will speak up for him? Tang had them sit down, then took another red pen from the table and pulled out a piece of paper. You should have heard the president's lecture. The exam difficulty is not low. Over the years, the passing rate for grade 2 feet of this exam is around 40%, and for grade 3 feet it's around 60%. He wrote and drew on the paper, this exam has a passing rate cutoff. Although the passing score for both the written test and the practical test is only 60 points, the minimum requirement for both the first and second rounds of the exam is to pass. It doesn't just depend on your final overall evaluation score. In other words, if you fail the written test, you won't pass the second round of the exam, even if you slaughter everyone in the testing room. Tang glanced coolly at Owen in the corner and snorted, wasting time and public resources. Cornley, who had failed the exam twice, one of which he didn't even pass the written test, swallowed. Will he really not hit me? Trembling JPG. Then, based on the average score of the first round of the exam, the difficulty of the corresponding testing room will also increase when the second round of the exam is held. I think Pettigrew and Cornley, who have taken the exam a few times, should have explained this to you, Klein. Although the testing rooms are randomly assigned, if you carefully study the past exam questions, you can indeed see many testing rooms that are repeated every year, but many details are changed. Tang drew a circle around, second round of the exam. He looked at Klein, who was a complete newcomer, and as a diviner, your knowledge of ritual magic should be sufficient, and the inspiration from this pathway is also very strong. It is a pathway that focuses on the mystical side. So, in the second round of the exam, if you want to get a high score, you must demonstrate similar abilities. For example, when choosing ritual magic based on the different environments, the combination and application of ritual magic. Klein quickly inferred this. Yes. Tang nodded. Although reaching 60 points counts as passing, the final overall evaluation score will still affect you when you continue to take grade 2 and grade 1. For example, even if you pass grade 3 feet, but don't reach grade C, which means your final overall evaluation score doesn't reach 70 points, you still cannot participate in the grade 2 exam even if the sequence requirements for registration are met. Quite rigorous grading criteria. Klein stroked his chin, his attention falling on the stack of exam papers on the desk. The overall evaluation score is the combined score of the final scores from the first and second rounds of the exam, and both must be passing. Okay, I understand. I'll go back and look at them. Cornley looked at the exam papers on the table and fell into deep despair. Even for an sleepless, with only a few days left, they wouldn't be able to finish, right? Just treat it as practice beforehand. If you study well normally, your written test score usually won't be too bad. Pettigrew comforted Cornley. Are there no questions for the second round of the exam? No. Tang rested his chin on his hand, leaning on the desk. To be precise, even if there were, it wouldn't be useful. There are too many variables that can be used to create problems. Compared to the written test, which is restricted by rules and frameworks and has problem-solving methods that are always the same, the second round of the exam is more inclined to test the candidate's immediate response ability, which also leads to the passing rate of the second round of the exam always being low. However, the content of the second round of the exam does have one common point. Speaking of this, Tang suddenly thought of something and showed a benevolent smile, which made Cornley and Klein feel a little uneasy. The monsters in the second round of the exam, all have a bit of a mental pollution flavor. If you don't want to be directly dragged to St. Peter's psychiatric department for treatment after coming out, try to avoid those monsters as much as possible. This was a rather kind reminder. After all, even Tang himself felt a little uneasy sometimes when he saw the monsters he put in those places. Let's go eat something first. Well, for last-minute cramming or whatever, you have to be full first, right? Owen in the corner spoke weakly. You no longer have time to waste on eating. Tang looked over, his face full of grief and indignation. Hurry up and write. You don't have time to eat or sleep, understand, Owen? Owen, thank you, he doesn't deserve it. Klein, who was watching Tang's dramatic change in expression, what did his brother do to him? Is this the resentment from failing the exam so many times? 17 times. Pettigrew added softly from the side, self-study requires a 50 gold pound registration fee. What, 50 gold pounds? Klein looked at Pettigrew with a, holy crap, that's expensive, expression, shocked. Cornley also looked shocked, as if he had just found out. Is the registration fee for this exam so expensive? Klein, who had been choked by surprise, reacted and asked softly, is it reimbursed? Pettigrew paused, looking at Klein with a somewhat strange gaze. Yes, the church will reimburse it. Only then did Klein breathe a sigh of relief. It's good if it's reimbursed, it's good if it's reimbursed. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't participate in this exam. Although the subsidy after passing is very tempting, if he fails, his wallet will suffer greatly. Thinking of this, Klein and Cornley, just like Tang, also looked at Owen in the corner with faces full of grief and indignation, disappointed that he wasn't living up to expectations. How much wasted money was this? Owen, who was said to have been swindled out of a large sum of money on the South Continent and came back only to be scrutinized with such a prodigal son look. Ah, no, what kind of look is that? Explain yourselves. Tang. I'll give you a look, you figure it out yourself. Embarrassing himself at someone else's doorstep, how unlucky. After everyone left to eat, Owen breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at the things in his hand with helplessness in his eyes, hesitating whether he should just throw them away, then spirit world travel back to the South Continent and escape the August exam. Why do I have to do this? Shaking the papers in his hand, Owen covered his face a little painfully. He desperately needed knowledge poured into his brain. Please, let a hidden sage come. At this moment, another person appeared in the office. That was Nicholas Flamel, wearing a black silk top hat and a tailcoat of the same color. Nicola, weren't you discussing issues with the high-ranking officials of those churches? Most of the candidates for the grade 1 exam are saint angels from various churches. Beyonders of this level coming to Tingen usually have other tasks besides the exam, as demigods of this level have no material needs. Nicola had just gone to deal with the various issues concerning the churches where the saint angels who came to Tingen City for the exam belonged. Seeing Nicola appear here at this moment, Owen looked at him strangely. What happened? Do people from other churches have problems and need to find Tang? It's already over, nothing major. And rather than saying I came to find Tang, it's more accurate to say Tang asked me to find you. Nicola walked over gently, picked up the papers in front of Owen, glanced at them, and then put them down. He patted Owen's shoulder, his expression becoming increasingly gentle. Mr. Owen, it seems your potential for growth is really high. Owen. He paused for a moment before realizing what Nicola was saying. He wasn't saying his potential for growth was high. He was saying there weren't many correct answers on his paper, right? This thing counters divination and prophecy, including spiritual intuition and the luck of the fate pathway. It can deceive all possible cheating methods of candidates, leading to either correct or incorrect answers, making it impossible to use as a reference standard at all. When you get something like this, you really can only look at it word by word like a primary school student doing homework. Owen glanced at his exam paper, frowned, and couldn't help but doubt himself, muttering softly, is it really that bad? Need a couple of sleepless potions to refresh yourself? Nicola suggested. I think if you don't pass this time, Tang will really go crazy. Owen was silent. Silence is the Cambridge of this evening. When it comes to making things difficult for others, this guy Tang is a professional. How about, just lock me up in the mental hospital? He suggested. I think the treatment there is quite good. Nicola asked back with exceptional benevolence, what do you think? I think it's good. Let the Archbishop of the Knowledge and Wisdom God Church personally treat you. Let's forget it. Owen sighed, then looked at Nicola again and asked, Tang's plan, what stage has it reached? Nicola withdrew his gaze from those troublesome things, lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, looked at Owen, and instead of answering his question, asked, how is the South Continent doing? According to that kid's request, we expelled the hedonist faction of the Rose School, unified the spiritual church, and redeveloped the faith of death worship. Owen leaned back in his chair, sprawling, but when he said this, his expression clearly became a little serious, but it's still quite different compared to the real underworld, and the situation in the real underworld is not right. It sounds like the progress is going quite smoothly. Nicola adjusted his silk top hat. We are trying to deal with the big troubles deep within the underworld, Mr. Owen. Try your best to finish digesting the Pale Emperor potion before September. We will be setting off then. Setting off? Owen subconsciously asked back, where are we going? Ancestor worship. Nicola's smiling voice gradually changed into Tang's voice. Nicola's face rapidly changed, and time worms and spirit worms overlapped and intersected. Finally, these frantically wriggling flesh buds combined to form Tang's appearance. He glanced at the trash on the table, his expression quite calm. Let's go home, Dad is waiting for us. Taking the papers, it would be better to let Dad give Owen a good beating with a bamboo whip. Chapter 290, 289 Second Round Examination. August 7th. Seeing the written exam results announced by Khoi University, Klein Moretti couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. My review wasn't in vain, and staying up late to do practice questions was also the right choice. Very good, half of the 50 gold pounds have been saved. This morning, the scores for the written part of all first round exams will be released, followed immediately by the second round of examinations in the afternoon. Klein Moretti and Cornley both confirmed their scores. As they were leaving, they saw Tang, who was smiling a little eerily, walking by from the side of the road. That resentment looked like it could sustain 10 evil sword immortals. I feel a little cold, Klein, let's go back. Cornley pulled Klein Moretti, and Klein Moretti nodded in agreement. Yes, it looks like it's going to get cooler today, let's go back and add a layer of clothes. Exactly. It's better not to go up and join the fun at a time like this. Returning to Blackthorn Security Company, after Klein Moretti and Cornley discussed the afternoon exam, the two of them took a nap first to maintain sufficient energy. Even Cornley, as an insomniac, had to force himself to sleep soundly for 2 hours, as no one knew which exam question they would draw in the afternoon, and whether they would have time to sleep then. If they drew a test room full of zombies, a test room where they would have to start a battle royale as soon as they entered, Cornley couldn't imagine how pathetic he would be then. But I'd rather it be the ones I've seen before. Cornley sighed. If it's a completely unfamiliar one, and it's a puzzle-solving type, I can't imagine what will happen if I can't solve it. Tang had warned them before to be careful of monsters. And the monsters in puzzle-solving test rooms are always characterized by high stats and almost overwhelming aggression. In such exam questions, if the puzzle cannot be solved, even in a 3-level test room, it is possible for a monster to clear out all the examinees with a single normal attack. At 1:30 p.m., Klein Moretti and Cornley arrived at the entrance of Tingen University on time. Pettigrew, who brought them, glanced at the entrance of Tingen University, then withdrew his gaze and offered his most sincere blessings to the two examinees who were about to enter the test room. Klein Moretti and Cornley walked with somewhat nervous and heavy steps towards the entrance of Tingen University not far away. At this moment, there were quite a few people at the entrance of Tingen University. However, when Klein Moretti looked over, he found that these people had stiff and pale expressions, their bodies were thin and long, over 2 meters tall, their faces were strange, with green faces and fangs, expressionless, their mouths were wide open, and their bodies were light, not like living people, but more like paper figures that had come to life. There were also ordinary people constantly walking by from outside Tingen University. They were not beyonders, they just came here to eat some local specialty snacks, and these people completely ignored the horrific spectacle at the entrance of Tingen University. And those who could see this strange phenomenon were all escorted into Tingen University by paper figures. Please follow me, examinee number 007121, examinee number 001419. Cornley looked at the few paper figures floating in front of him leading the way and couldn't help but rub his arm. I remember the last time I took the exam, the ones leading the way were zombies with yellow talismans on their heads. The time before last, the ones leading the way were smiling, had growths on their feet, and could transform. Ah, they were called something like Chongwei. It's really quite sinister. Klein Moretti also, listening to Cornley rambling like this, couldn't help but complain in his heart when he saw this kind of Chinese horror stuff. Senior, please be a person. He now suspected that the senior crossing who was much earlier than Great Emperor was also from his Great Eater Empire. As the exam deadline approached, many people were successively led into Tingen University by paper figures. Klein Moretti quickly separated from Cornley at a crossroads, they seemed to be in different test rooms. However, what made Klein Moretti even more curious was whether Tingen University had such a large space to accommodate so many test rooms. After all, whether it was Raccoon City, Ishimura, or Silent Hill, the area they occupied would not be smaller than the overall area of Tingen University. Perhaps they used the student pathway's ability to manipulate space, such as space expansion, space folding, etc. After all, this is a world with gods, a supernatural world, and many things cannot be measured from a scientific perspective. Just like the virtual reality created by the one whose honorific name is Incarnation of all error, that Klein Moretti had come into contact with before, something like a test room doesn't necessarily have to occupy space, in the true sense. Letting all the examinees have a lucid dream can also be considered a test room, and it's more efficient. Tang followed the paper figure that had been leading him to a normal teaching building. As a graduate of the history and language departments of Tingen University, Klein Moretti glanced at the building in front of him and knew that this was the chemistry department's experimental teaching building. Normally, this teaching building was quite lively, with things like students running out in a panic and the teaching building being blown up, but now it was summer vacation, and this teaching building was strangely quiet. Examinee number 007121, please use your admission ticket to open the door. The thin and tall paper figure, which seemed to be able to leave the ground at any time, pointed to a door at the end of the first floor of the chemistry experiment teaching building not far away. Klein Moretti nodded, and after thanking the paper figure very seriously, he took out the admission ticket that Miskatonic University had issued a few days ago from his pocket. He was surprised to find that the originally square document had actually turned into a rusty key that perfectly matched the keyhole of that door. He held the key, inserted it into the lock, and turned it. With the sound of mechanical rotation, the door opened in response. Inside the door was not the experimental benches and equipment of the chemistry lab. Klein Moretti saw that it was filled with a vast expanse of white light. As soon as the door opened, the light swallowed Klein Moretti's figure and pulled him into it. The door slowly closed. The paper figure behind Klein Moretti grinned. It lightly tapped the ground, and its already thin body twisted and floated towards the sky, as if an invisible thin thread was hanging it, pulling it towards the horizon. Examinee number 007121, logging into test room. Test room random selection, complete. 3. Level ritual magic level test, second round test room, Black Vortex Town, loading. Complete. Good luck with the exam. In Euclidean space, countless large and small light clusters, accompanied by countless brilliant stars, together formed a world reflection that seemed boundless. At this time, a huge light cluster extended a thin and tough transparent line, which wound and coiled towards a certain place, seemingly passing through layers of time and space, pulling a person into its body and containing him. Such a scene continued, and people constantly connected with this area that seemed to reflect the entire world, entering it. Nicola, standing among countless light clusters, his body constantly changed, and time worms crawled out of his body one by one, drilling into those light clusters. In the eyes of Mr. Error, there was no longer the light brown eyes that seemed to be filled with a smile, but a brilliant micro-light that seemed to reflect the entire world. He bowed slightly, and when it reached 2 o'clock ruin time, all the light clusters suddenly lit up with brilliant light spots, and they bloomed with the most dazzling and brilliant halos. This professional ritual magic level test, second round examination, officially begins. Amidst the flashing white light, when Klein Moretti's consciousness returned, he was already sitting in a steam train. As the train sped through the fields with a chugging sound, Klein Moretti subconsciously looked around at himself and his surroundings. A very simple and normal environment, not the kind of test room that is full of monsters as soon as you enter. Klein Moretti examined it carefully. His attire had not changed, only a translucent bracelet with 12 links had been added to his left wrist. Black Vortex Town. Klein Moretti frowned slightly, and then the next moment, a piece of information suddenly rushed into Klein Moretti's mind. 3. Level ritual magic level test, second round test room, Black Vortex Town, test room information summary. You are a returning university student. A few days ago, your mother contacted you by telegram, informing you of the unexpected death of your uncle. You rushed back to Black Vortex Town on the fastest steam train, but when you returned to the familiar town, you found that this town was becoming increasingly wrong. Examinee number 007121, your exam question is, explore at least 5 places with obvious problems among the following, make corresponding records, and escape from Black Vortex Town before the disaster strikes. Location 1. Uncle's funeral. Dad, why is the smoke from Uncle's burning black? Location 2. Hospital, they say pregnant women need to eat that kind of thing to be nutritious. Location 3. School, the people coming to school seem to be getting slower and slower. Location 4. Home, there's a coffin here, do you want to lie in it? Location 5. The road home, this is a huge vortex, no one can leave. Location 6. Swirl Lake, is there a typhoon today? But why is the typhoon gone? Location 7. Underground, what exactly is here? Note: this exam question involves key information for the 2-level ritual magic level test. Examinees are advised to think rationally and are not recommended to choose this location for recording. Quote. Examinees, please note that your mental value and health value have been correspondingly quantified. When your mental value and health value fall below the corresponding defense line 20, the exam ends, and you will be forcibly removed from the test room. Please pay attention to your safety. Life comes first, exam comes second. Exam, begins. When Klein Moretti woke up again from the vast amount of information, the steam train had already begun to slow down, seemingly about to stop at the station. As the steam train whistled and screamed, Klein Moretti saw a girl stand up diagonally opposite him. She was a lady who looked to be over 1.6 meters tall, wearing a long goose yellow dress, with slightly curly brown hair, and a slightly lazy demeanor, appearing calm enough even in this environment. She also saw Klein Moretti, who was looking at her at this moment, smiled at Klein Moretti, and then walked off the steam train without hesitation. Also an examinee, Klein Moretti was slightly taken aback, but quickly understood this point. After the first exam ended, Cornley had explained the main details of the second round of examination to Klein Moretti, which included that the second round of examination is divided into two types: single-player test rooms and multiplayer test rooms. Single-player test rooms, as the name suggests, everyone in the entire test room except you is like the people Rosal the Great wrote about in his novel, called NPCs. They are not actually existing. You just need to pass the exam as quickly as possible and don't need to worry about them. They generally can't help you either. In multiplayer test rooms, this is the most common examination method in the ritual magic qualification examination. After all, ritual magic is essentially auxiliary. The most important thing for us is still the Beander abilities brought by our own sequence and potions. In multiplayer test rooms, who cooperates with whom and how to cooperate is also an important consideration for the examiner's scoring data. In other words, in gaming terms, this is a multiplayer dungeon. Although the test room information didn't mention it, with such a large test room area, there should be more than just the two of us examinees. Klein Moretti got off the steam train thoughtfully. Then he saw that at the station platform, the words, Black Vortex Town, were written in ancient Hermes. Klein Moretti glanced at the station sign, thinking there was nothing wrong, but his spiritual intuition suddenly pulled his thoughts back to the ancient Hermes on the station sign. Compared to normal ancient Hermes, those words were slanted, distorted. It looks like a vortex that is about to form, right? A female voice came from the side. Klein Moretti looked over, and the female voice came from the lady who had gotten off the platform one step ahead of Klein Moretti. Furs Wall, perhaps you've heard my name. The lady named Furs said with a smile. Klein Moretti, I've heard of you, Ms. Furs Wall. My sister is a loyal reader of the novel you wrote. As an excellent diviner, when Klein Moretti heard this name, he recalled that he had seen this name at home. This was the author of a novel called Wuthering Heights. His sister Melissa seemed to like reading this book. He didn't expect her to be a Beander, and to be assigned to the same test room. Really, Furs seemed very happy, but she quickly controlled the smile on her face. Then I hope we can cooperate a little in this test room. After all, judging from the exam patterns in previous years, without cooperation, the probability of us passing in a place like this is not high. Ms. Wall, this seems to be, well, an exploration-oriented exam question. Yes, Furs sighed and muttered softly, I hate this kind of thing the most. After all, if you don't seek death, you won't die. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 291, 290 Unlucky Anderson. In the world of mysticism, seeing things you shouldn't see, hearing sounds you shouldn't hear, and knowing things you shouldn't know can truly lead to death. And in this exploration-oriented examination hall, candidates are forced to venture further and further down the path of seeking death. The more one explores, the higher the final score, but generally the more mental value decreases, making it easier to die suddenly, and be cleared from the examination hall due to seeing things they shouldn't, hearing sounds they shouldn't, or knowing things they shouldn't. In examination halls with this type of question, it's generally difficult for candidates to survive until all the questions are answered. If the task requirements aren't completed, the final score won't be very high. Klein pondered his next actions. After a moment of thought, his fingers flipped, and a ruined gold pound appeared in his hand. With a ding, Klein flicked the gold pound into the air and caught it. Are you divining? Klein glanced at the pattern facing up on the gold pound in his hand, a faint, scholarly smile on his face. Yes, Ms. Wall, I am attempting to divination the fortune or misfortune of what comes next. This type of divination, which involves one's own fate and safety, is always the most difficult to interfere with and the easiest to obtain. Very careful, this style of doing things is quite good. So, What was your divination result? It seems safe for now, but I cannot guarantee the accuracy of the divination result. After all, Ms. Wall, you should also know that divination is not omnipotent. Of course. Furs nodded in understanding. Then she turned her head, looking thoughtfully at the text that was slowly, but surely, wriggling and distorting. After that, she turned back to look at Klein beside her. Mr. Moretti, what is your identity? A university student returning home to prepare for the funeral of my uncle, who died for reasons unknown. Ah, your uncle's funeral. Furs smoothed her hair, a faint smile appearing on her face. My identity is, well, I should be your uncle's neighbor. I came back today to visit my hospitalized sister and attend your uncle's funeral as well. This time, the exam question actually came with identities. It's like role-playing or playing a murder mystery game. Klein added in his heart. She looked at Klein somewhat teasingly, saying playfully, see, this is just like what's written in novels, a fated encounter. Klein smiled, but I think this might not be a coincidence. The identities given in this exam should have some deeper consideration behind them. For example, both identities are meant to provide a necessary reason for them to attend the uncle's funeral they are going to next. Are you candidates as well? The steam train behind them had already blown its starting whistle. As the chugging sound of it moving forward came, a male voice sounded from behind Klein and Furs while they were discussing. Klein and Furs looked back and saw a young man with short blonde hair and green eyes. He was carrying a suitcase and raised the translucent bracelet with 12 segments that he was wearing on his left wrist. He scanned Klein's and Furs' wrists, also looking thoughtful. And you are? Klein countered. He indeed seemed to be a candidate as well. Anderson Hood. The blonde man introduced himself. He grinned, smiled, and said with a hint of weariness, also, well, a victim of this exam. A victim? How so? Furs, who had just pulled out a notebook from who knows where, picked up her pen again upon hearing this. Even within the examination hall, she seemed quite interested. That sounds like it has a story. Ah, well, I can't really go into detail about that. Anderson scratched the back of his head, still smiling. But the only thing I can tell you is, whatever you do, don't go to Lumberg. Lumberg, the region that believes in the god of knowledge and wisdom. Klein recalled the original body's memories and said, but why mention Lumberg suddenly? And the god of knowledge and wisdom? Anderson nodded with a slightly pained expression. Because you simply cannot imagine how terrifying the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom is right now. Oh, Lord of Storms, I don't know which lunatic gave the clergy there this idea, but they actually stop people on the road and make them take tests. If you can't finish the test, they forcibly take you to the church for 72 hours of knowledge education. In short, let me advise you, even if you travel abroad in the future, don't go to Lumberg. Didn't they say only Lumberg residents who believe in the God of knowledge and wisdom would receive this treatment? Ms. Furs Wall, the great writer beside Klein, found it a bit strange. But from what you're saying, you seem to also believe in the Lord of Storms at the same time. Walking the seas year-round, you always have to believe in that existence, don't you? Anderson shrugged, saying it very casually. For general believers, believing in this here and that there is a very common thing. Furs was just about to say something and dig further, but seeing that the candidate didn't intend to continue speaking, she didn't press him further. Oh right, what identities did you draw? After emerging from that self-pitying mood, Anderson looked at Furs and Klein. He also noticed the ancient Hermes text on the train station sign behind the two of them, which was constantly twisting and gradually turning into a vortex shape. I am a writer, returning to this town to visit my sick sister and attend my neighbor's funeral. Mr. Moretti is returning home to attend his uncle's funeral, oh, which is also my neighbor's funeral, Furs said. Anderson was silent for a moment, then couldn't help but sigh. As expected, I've been really unlucky lately. He scratched his head again, his blonde hair, parted 30 to 70, was messed up from being rubbed. I am a photographer, tasked with following and recording you using a photo method. There are no fixed options, but there must be at least 12 photos with special qualities. The concept of cameras exists in this world, but judging by Anderson's tone, this photo and photos are definitely not simple things taken with a camera. And considering the nature of the exam, it should involve some special symbolic elements from the field of ritual magic. As for Klein's and Furs' exam questions, they are merely about recording, and there are no restrictions on the method of recording. Compared to Klein's and Furs' exam questions, This strange guy's question is surprisingly difficult. Perhaps it's because my Beander level is higher than yours. Seeing their surprised looks, Anderson's slightly troubled expression turned into a grin again. Being unlucky is a bit unlucky, but as long as we cooperate wholeheartedly, I don't think there will be any major problems. As for how a Sequence 5 got into this examination hall, after all, it's the unlucky Anderson, isn't this all fate's arrangement? But I think he could be a bit more unlucky. Nicola, go take away some more of his good luck. This is also for the sake of balancing the fairness within the examination hall. I'm not settling a personal score. In the Euclidean space, Tang stared wide-eyed at the scene displayed within a sphere of light. Ho, cursing him right in front of him. Keep cursing, keep cursing. When you get back, I'll have the people from the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom drag you to the church headquarters to be a diligent floor cleaner. Nicola pondered for a moment. But the suggestion you gave to their church, how should I put it? Indeed, it seems, perhaps, possibly, truly, quite terrifying. Dragging people off the street to take tests and things like that, just thinking about it is quite terrifying. Feeling a sudden chill down his spine, Anderson looked strangely at the tail of the steam train that had already left the platform. He looked around, then slowly said, "This examination hall seems to only have the three of us candidates." After waiting a bit longer at the steam train station and seeing no more passengers with strange bracelets appear, the group exchanged basic information with each other. After briefly mentioning their sequence and general Beander abilities, they prepared to take transportation to the seaside town standing by the sea to begin answering the questions. And upon learning that this strange fellow, Anderson Hood, was a Sequence 5 Beander, both Klein and Furs were exceptionally surprised by this. What kind of look is that? Anderson found it a bit funny, but also a little sad. But why would a Sequence 5 come to take the Level 3 Feat Ritual Magic Proficiency test? Furs couldn't help but ask curiously. According to the announcement issued by Miskatonic University, this should be the standard for a Level 2 Feat Ritualist, right? Haven't you taken this before? That can't be right. Among the North Continent countries, the Professional Ritual Magic Proficiency test is a very common official exam in the mysticism circle with relatively good certification and value. It doesn't even restrict whether the test takers are from the Orthodox Church. Moreover, they really do issue that subsidy. Even without things like anonymous bank accounts, you can exchange the certificate of qualification at the main Miskatonic University campus or a branch campus. Probably because I'm not very good at these things. Anderson shrugged. Besides, I was forced to. Since I was forced to take this exam, the simpler and easier it is, the better, of course. He hadn't passed the Level 3 Feat exam, and according to the rules of this exam, he couldn't skip levels to take the Level 2 Feat 1. Alright, that makes sense. The few of them didn't dwell on this matter for too long. Although Sequence 5 Beyonders are strong, they are not uncommon in Tingen City. After all, the number of demigods in this city is not small. Klein, who had seen quite a few things by following the captain and members of the Tingen University garrison, as well as Miskatonic University investigators, was quite composed. However, judging by Anderson Hood's situation, this exam has a certain balancing mechanism. The stronger the person, the relatively harder the task. There won't be a situation where a demigod comes to a Level 3 Feat exam and clears it in a few seconds. Of course, a demigod coming to a Level 3 Feat examination hall would certainly just take some time to pass the exam. There won't be much variation in this regard. After all, the Level 3 Feat examination hall is primarily aimed at Beyonders from Sequence 7 to Sequence 9 and cannot restrict demigods for too long. It's raining. Just as they exited the steam train station, before they could even get into one of the waiting horse-drawn carriages lined up for customers, a light drizzle began to fall from the somewhat gloomy sky, from within the low-hanging clouds. The few of them looked up at the sky together, watching the strange clouds with some surprise. They weren't the usual dense, dark mass seen on normal days, but were rhythmically, regularly rotating, turning, and converging towards a certain point. Like a huge, forming vortex. In location 6 given in the exam question, which is this anomalous scene at Spur Lake, it seems a typhoon was mentioned. This strange weather is like the prelude to a typhoon. It certainly looks like it's going to be windy. Anderson stretched out his hand, measured the wind speed, and then cast his gaze towards the distance, at the edge of the horizon where it met and disappeared into the distant sea. Anderson rubbed his chin, then said with experience, looking at the hint, there's definitely going to be a typhoon here in the coming time. But how this typhoon will disappear? That's not for sure. The eyes of Klein, Furs, and Anderson all involuntarily fell upon the not-so-large lake in the center of this seaside town. That lake is called Sphere Lake, and it's also the key location where the typhoon is mentioned. In the hired carriage, the group of three rode, not heading to the residence associated with Klein's and Furs' identities, but instead driving towards a building with a large chimney on the west side of the town. The coachman driving the carriage wasn't good at conversation. The few of them looked out through the carriage windows, observing this completely unfamiliar town. Low houses, pedestrians on the road, roadside greenery, it was all normal, with nothing strange about it, and no monsters present. It certainly seems to be an exploration-oriented examination hall, and it should also include puzzle-solving tasks. As long as we don't touch the key exam questions, the things here shouldn't attack us. Furs thought for a moment, then looked at Anderson, who was sitting opposite her, next to Klein, this Sequence 5 expert who, according to himself, was unlucky enough. She sincerely asked, "Mr. Hood, how are your combat abilities?" "Just average," Anderson smiled. "I should be a bit stronger than you, Ms." The carriage quickly arrived at the place the group was heading to. It was a crematorium. As relatives and neighbors, and the photographer, who was there to photo, they arrived at the first location with an issue. But, are they going to cremate the body? Furs raised an eyebrow. The Ruined Kingdom hasn't practiced this form of burial for a long time. It's said to have been popular for a period several hundred years ago, but now most people are buried directly after receiving requiem upon death. Burning bodies, on the other hand, can occasionally be seen in the Intis Republic, as the eternal blazing sun also has the custom of purifying body and mind with fire. Chapter 292, 291 Mechanism. Generally speaking, if a body is to be cremated, it's either due to local customs, or it is. Klein and Furs exchanged glances. Furs spoke first, "There's something wrong with the body. Furthermore, cremation usually shouldn't happen so quickly. At least in my impression, there should be a considerable period between death and cremation, what's called lying in state." The mother of this identity telegraphed Klein yesterday. He hasn't even returned today, yet the cremation was rushed like this. The problem is certainly not small. As a keyboard warrior from before his transmigration, Klein had also studied folklore for a period. Now that he knew the designer of this examination hall might be from his hometown, Klein couldn't help but view the abnormal parts through the lens of the folklore knowledge he had studied before transmigrating. Anderson chuckled from the side, "Looks like we're thinking along the same lines." They had informed each other of parts of their respective tasks. Leaving aside Anderson, a Sequence 5 Beander, Klein's examination question, who was also a Sequence 9, was not the same as Furs's, but for this strange scene, their hints were identical. Location 1. Uncle, neighbor's funeral. Dad, why is the smoke from Uncle's burning black? Black smoke isn't inherently strange, but the fact that it's highlighted means what it's trying to convey needs consideration. In other words, this, Uncle's, funeral is, in a sense, very important. After getting off the carriage, the few of them, getting rained on, walked into the crematorium where there were quite a few people. Almost everyone in the crematorium was dressed in white mourning clothes. Some covered their faces and wept, some comforted those who were crying, some sighed, some chatted, and some helped out. They all looked very normal. It was impossible to tell which country they were from. The language they spoke, like the sign at the steam train station, was all ancient Hermes. Klein paused, and slowly let out a breath. Fortunately, his ancient Hermes had improved well through a month of practice and study, otherwise, he might really not have understood what they were saying. But because of this, whether it was Klein, Furs, or Anderson, they all secretly heightened their vigilance. Ancient Hermes is a language capable of leveraging natural forces. Once they said something they shouldn't, it was possible for corresponding abnormalities to occur directly. However, this situation did not happen. Everything was as usual, and those people also didn't suddenly have their bones shatter, heads twist, or crawl darkly towards them. It was very calm, but within the calm, there was an unspeakable strangeness. Just because they haven't become like that now doesn't mean they won't become like that later. Klein, a lady holding an umbrella not far away, saw the few people at the entrance of the crematorium and quickly walked towards them. That was a lady with relatively refined makeup, wearing a white dress with traces left from burning paper money. She looked a bit haggard, and her eyes held sorrow and a hint of hidden fear. Klein's spiritual intuition told him that the lady in front of him was afraid of something. What could she be afraid of? Klein furrowed his brow. The only possibility. It could only be that hastily cremated body. You child, why didn't you tell Mom you were back? Klein's expression shifted, but he quickly put on a professional fake smile, got into character, and seriously played the role of his son. First time's awkward, second time's familiar. Furs and Anderson exchanged glances. While Klein was extracting information from the NPCs here, they separated and walked into the crematorium, preparing to see if there was anything wrong. The staff in the crematorium seemed quite idle. Furs specifically chose areas with fewer people. Seeing no one around, she used the apprentice's opening door ability to directly pass through walls, saving time and concealing herself. Following her spiritual intuition, Furs quickly reached the staff lounge area. She leaned against the outer wall near the window and vaguely heard the voices of two people talking inside. Isn't it strange? The number of people committing suicide in Black Vortex Town recently is increasing. Hey, and their death appearances are pretty similar. It's said that when they died, their internal organs and bones were all shattered and bent, completely unlike someone doing that to themselves. If the police station hadn't determined it wasn't a homicide, I would suspect a serial killer has come to our town. Furs took out her notebook from her pocket. She usually likes to write down her inspirational material during moments of inspiration to provide plot points for her novels. Because of this, Furs has the habit of carrying a notebook with her, and now is the perfect time to record key information. Who says, you don't know, when I was preparing the body for today's cremation, tisk tisk, that was the most gruesome one I've ever seen. I felt like he had curled himself up into a snail. Just thinking about it makes me sick. I really don't know how these people manage to curl themselves up like that. Furs quickly jotted down the tags, suicide, and strange death method, and then wrote down the Ruin language word, snail. But this method of suicide is really novel, one of the crematorium staff said. I've never seen a suicide death like this. Hey, do you think some cult might have entered our Black Vortex town? Cult? Not likely, right? Another crematorium staff member replied, this place is protected by the Lord. If this death method is truly a suicidal sacrifice performed by cultists who believe in evil gods, then the bishop of the church would definitely react. That's true. Furs once again noted down the words, cult, and church, and added a few exclamation marks after them. There's an examination question with a religious nature, and it involves cults and the church of a true god. This might not just be background story, it could be helpful for their future actions. But we first need to figure out who the mainstream faith is in Black Vortex Town. Thanks to the efforts of many ritual masters at Miskatonic University, although there are many ritual magics that don't require faith, meaning they don't require the participation of a god, or are implicitly allowed by God, one of the most powerful types of ritual magic is ritual magic that necessarily involves a god. Lighting 3 candles, symbolizing self, God, and honorable name, and borrowing power from a god, the effect of this type of ritual magic will be maximized. If the church here is the artisan church, and they believe in the god of craftsmen, we can try this path. While listening to the casual chat between the staff, Furs looked at the low-hanging clouds outside. Then, her pupils suddenly dilated. She seemed to have seen something extremely terrifying and unspeakable, causing ringing in her ears and her mind to turn into a mess. That is, she couldn't help but cry out. In the staff lounge, the staff's conversation also stopped. A crematorium employee walked over, saw Furs by the window, and also saw the sky not far away, still raining, with low-hanging clouds. They screamed out. Anderson held a camera about half the size of his head, attempting to use a normal camera to complete his task. Unfortunately, doing something like casually walking around and taking pictures at someone else's funeral is quite normal to get beaten up for. Because these people still seemed to be just ordinary people, Anderson gave a half-hearted smile to those chasing him who couldn't catch him at all, then put away his camera, not immediately checking if he had captured anything extraordinary in his camera. Taking advantage of this time, Anderson calmly walked to the incinerator. The incinerator at Black Vortex Town's crematorium was an old-style furnace, with a long tall chimney connected to the sky to discharge the smoke produced by the burning flames. This old-style incinerator had a small glass window where bodies were placed, allowing the incineration staff to see the burning situation inside. It's just that, for some reason, Something was clearly burning inside at this time, but there were no staff on duty here. It's as if it was specifically waiting for me to come and look at what's inside. Anderson paced over, leaned close to the small glass window, and took a look at what was inside. The object being burned and roasted on the flames was not in the shape of a person. Instead, it looked like a tortoise shell, or something like a round shield. It had already been somewhat softened by the burning, charred and deformed, completely merged with the flames, making it difficult to see exactly what it was. In short, it didn't look like a person. Anderson squinted his eyes and used his Beyonder ability to slightly separate the object completely merged with the flames inside from a distance, revealing a more specific appearance of the object. Hiss. After seeing clearly what that thing was, even Anderson, known as the strongest hunter in the Mist Sea, couldn't help but gasp. It was a snail. But it was a snail that had been carbonized by the burning, yet its hands and feet could still be vaguely seen, and its head, not yet completely burned to ashes, was visible. That was a person who had curled themselves up, turning into a bizarre vortex. But how could a person bend and twist their body into this shape? Only mollusks could perform such movements that cannot be completed from a normal angle. Look at the sky, someone shouted loudly. Anderson, who was carefully examining the bizarre burned corpse, subconsciously raised his head and looked at the overcast sky outside the awning. His pupils also showed signs of dilation, his mouth slightly open. He seemed to have seen a highly impactful scene that made him freeze on the spot. The rain was still falling lightly. The overcast sky had formed a massive vortex at some point. In the incinerator at the crematorium, the black smoke rising from the burning of the corpse continuously passed through and entered the rain-filled air, drawn by the enormous vortex, and drifted towards it. And at the edge of the massive vortex-shaped dark cloud, a huge, bizarre, hideous, terrifying dark cloud in the shape of a human head was slowly forming as the dark cloud continuously deepened its color, and as the corpse in the incinerator was continuously burned. That massive dark cloud was opening its mouth wide, its empty, lifeless eyes watching this seaside town, watching this ordinary town under the heavy rain. Or rather, it stared at this town, and slowly, the corners of its open mouth revealed an extremely bizarre smile. This smile was immense, this human face was immense, just like the megalophobia and uncanny valley effect inherent in many people's genes. Just looking at such a mass of cloud made one shiver all over and tremble uncontrollably. And Anderson could vaguely make out some facial features that were somewhat familiar to him on that not-so-clear human-shaped dark cloud. He slowly turned his head and looked at the large incinerator where the corpse was being burned. That face was exactly the same as the face of the strange corpse lying in the incinerator. Warning Candidate 018875, your sanity is decreasing due to observing an unspeakable entity. Current sanity, 80. That face was seen by Klein, Anderson, and Furs alike. After leaving the crematorium, Klein used the excuse of catching up with friends to greet the NPC mother and rendezvous with Anderson and Furs. Your sanity both dropped by 20. Is this a fixed deduction? According to the official explanation and description provided by Miskatonic, this sanity represents our mental stability, which is the probability of losing control. Anderson stroked his chin, that is, the lower a person's sanity, the easier it is to lose control. The sanity threshold to clear us out of the examination hall is 20. Once our sanity drops to this level, it proves we are not far from the outcome of losing control and cannot continue to stay in the examination hall. That is indeed the case. Furs chimed in, but there's one thing I don't quite understand. Our initial sanity value is 100, but it's impossible for everyone to drop by 20, or rather, for everyone to only drop by 20. Different sequences, different levels, and different pathways should have different resistance to things that can affect sanity reduction. Just like facing the incomplete mythical creature form of a Sequence 4, a Sequence 5 marionettist, and a Sequence 9 diviner, the former might only have an increased tendency to lose control, while the latter might instantly turn into a monster. It's impossible. How could she, Klein, and Anderson, three candidates with completely different sequence pathways, even vastly different ones, have the exact same sanity deduction? There is one possibility, Klein said, drawing from his rich online gaming experience. What possibility? Anderson and Furs both looked at Klein, who was thinking. Klein let out a breath. He smiled and slowly said, "This is a mechanism. As long as it's a scene related to the examination question, if we see it, observe it, and complete our task, then we must deduct 20 sanity as a price." Chapter 293, 292 Believing in the stars. Since each encounter with this kind of thing would forcibly clear 20 points of spirit value. Then a question naturally arose. How do I recover spirit value? Klein was the first to voice his doubts. The task assigned to Klein and Furs for the Level 3 Ritual Magic registration exam was for each of them to record 5 locations. If, according to the rule, a location was only considered recorded after encountering an indescribable object, the total would be 100 points of spirit value. This was equal to their maximum spirit value. In other words, if there was no way to recover spirit value during this period, they would have to be carried out after seeing the fourth indescribable object. Then this would be a task they couldn't complete. But since this location was used as an examination venue, it must mean there was a solution to this problem. According to general online game settings, things like spirit value should recover slowly and naturally over time. And within this examination venue, the value of madness tendency has been quantified into spirit value. So, as long as there is a Beyonder ability that can soothe our mental state and balance the tendency to lose control, it can quickly recover in a short time. The former was something pedigree and the others hadn't mentioned. After all, the rule of forcibly clearing spirit values should be rare, and the natural recovery of spirit values should also be common sense. The latter could be achieved through the soothing ability of the audience pathway. It should be able to recover naturally, but for Beyonders, once the tendency to lose control appears, it's very easy to continuously develop in a bad direction. Furs frowned and sighed. This is a very common problem. For us, once the tendency to lose control appears, it will only get worse and worse. If this tendency is quantified, I suspect that even if we can still recover naturally at this value, once the spirit value drops below 40, or even just below 60, it will be difficult for us to recover naturally. Because at that level, the spirit value will only decrease on its own, constantly sliding towards the edge of losing control and madness. At that point, it's impossible to recover on one's own. That's true. Anderson nodded thoughtfully. Then, he smiled at Furs and Klein. So, do you have any insights? I heard from those crematorium workers that this town has a church. Perhaps the church has a way. As everyone knows, churches generally tend to be righteous and orthodox. Since there is such a setting in this town, it means this setting must have a role it needs to fulfill. Anderson raised an eyebrow when he heard that, still smiling cheerfully. That makes sense. Let's go see what they believe in here and what kind of help they can offer us. Soon, the few of them took a carriage and arrived at the center of the town, which was a seemingly not so large church on the edge of a lake called Sphere Lake. There were no obvious signs at the entrance of the church. Looking at the style and architectural design, this church didn't resemble the Black Knight Goddess, Lord of Storms, and Artisan Church common in the Ruin Kingdom, nor did it resemble the Eternal Blazing Sun in Intis, the War God in Fursak, the Earth Mother in Feniport, or the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom in regions like Lumberg. It also doesn't look like the churches of evil gods like the Original Witch, True Creator, or Hidden Sage. Those evil god churches would probably explode just by looking at them. After examining the church, Anderson concluded with certainty. A church that doesn't belong to a righteous god or an evil god. Furs was somewhat surprised. This church, no, or rather, the residents of this Black Vortex town, were not believers of any righteous god or any evil god. There was only one church in the entire town, and what was worshipped in this church did not belong to any righteous god or any evil god. Then what do they believe in? Go inside and see, won't you know? Anderson, holding a camera half the size of his head, walked over first, extended the hand not holding the camera, and opened the church's previously closed door. It was raining heavily outside the door, but inside it was exceptionally peaceful, eerily quiet. Klein, Furs, and Anderson stood at the entrance of the church, looking inside. They had no intention of exploring rashly. There were no candles lit in the church. Instead, the ceiling of the church was hung with many stones that glowed faintly in the darkness. These stones were dotted on the ceiling of the church, like a peaceful, tranquil night sky. It was a bit like the goddess's church, Klein thought. In fact, as a general believer of the Black Knight Goddess, even though he had joined the Night Watchers, the official Beyonder organization of the Black Knight Church, Klein had not yet attended many church masses or prayers at the Black Knight Church in Tingen City. It really looks like the layout of the Black Knight Church. Furs, who believed in the god of craftsmen, had some understanding of the church layouts of one of the 3 major faiths in the Ruin Kingdom. Anderson waved his hand, indicating that there should be no danger inside. Only then did the few of them put away their umbrellas and enter the church. As they walked into the interior of the church and looked up at the glowing stones hanging on the ceiling of the church, which symbolized the stars, Klein noticed something unusual. No, it's not. As a night watcher, although Klein couldn't say he was very familiar with the layout of his own church, he was a night watcher after all. Churches that looked very similar on the outside, upon closer inspection, would actually reveal fundamental differences in their layout compared to the orthodox Black Knight church. Klein glanced at the stone decorations above his head that served as stars, and thoughtfully said to Furs and Anderson, "There are too many suns and moons here." Sun and moon. Furs followed Klein's gaze and carefully examined the starry sky above again for a moment, but she didn't see anything. Anderson, however, quickly understood what Klein was trying to express. "You mean, there are too many stones symbolizing the scarlet moon?" "Yes." Klein nodded with certainty. "The Black Knight goddess is the Lord of the Crimson. It is perfectly normal to hang a scarlet moon in her church, but in the starry sky above, the number of stones acting as the scarlet moon is not just dozens or hundreds. Those red glowing stones had no distinction in size or distance, which in mysticism meant they were equal to each other, with no essential difference. This also meant that there were countless scarlet moons here, and just as many suns shining. This was not the treatment the Lord of the Crimson could have. But if it's not the Black Knight goddess, then who is it?" Furs subconsciously asked back, "Are you interested in understanding the twinkling of the stars, understanding the laws of nature, understanding the mysteries of the universe?" Just at this moment, a somewhat aged voice suddenly came from the side of the church. Klein and Furs subconsciously looked over. Anderson narrowed his eyes, silently lowered the camera in his hand, and put his hand behind his back. Then they saw the place where the voice came from, where in the dense darkness, a candle had been lit at some point. The candle flame flickered, and the upward dancing flames gradually revealed a somewhat shriveled face full of age spots. That face looked 70 or 80 years old. The age spots snaked upwards like bean-curd skin from the collar of the black clerical robe, all the way to the graying, dry hair. It was an old man who looked like he was in his twilight years. "You are..." Klein hadn't expected there to be someone here. He didn't know how long he had been watching from the corner. It wasn't until he spoke at this moment that Klein and the others noticed his presence. He subconsciously took a step back and asked, "I am one of the stars representatives in Black Vortex Town, hee." The old man seemed to have no hostility towards the three outsiders who had entered the church. He drooped his eyelids, the candlelight spread out in his eyes, and his aged voice, like fingernails scratching bark, sounded again. The old man, who looked like a church clergyman, asked Klein and the others again, "Are you also believers of the stars?" And this time, without waiting for Klein and Furs to speak, Anderson was a step faster and took over the old man's topic. Under the candlelight, he spoke with a beaming smile. "Not yet, but I am very interested in the twinkling of the stars, the laws of nature, and the mysteries of the universe. If possible, after listening to your prayers and mass, can I convert from believing in the Black Knight goddess to believing in the stars? Didn't you say you believed in the God of knowledge and wisdom and the Lord of storms before? Are you acting like a triple-faced servant here?" Klein was completely shocked. Of course, as a general believer, he actually didn't have much faith in the goddess, but it was highly unlikely that he would be able to speak like Anderson, saying whatever was appropriate for the person he was talking to. Within the Night Watchers, if it were revealed that he believed in another god, he would probably spend the rest of his life in Captain Dunn's constant mumblings of, "Believe in the goddess, believe in the goddess." However, Klein felt he was a large-sized evil god, so converting would actually be a minor matter. But, the stars, what kind of belief is this? A newly born evil god? Klein frowned and thought carefully, but he was quite sure that none of the mysticism knowledge and information given to him by old Neil, Pedigree, or Tang involved the existence of such a god. Is it a final boss that spontaneously generated in the examination venue, or is it like Nicholas Flamel, an angel from a certain pathway or domain? Is this a church that believes in that angel? Of course. The wrinkles on the old man's face spread out, protruding like bean-curd skin. He raised a smile, but this smile looked somewhat hideous and terrifying under the dim candlelight. And then, when the stars were mentioned, this seemingly aged old man seemed to be injected with a new soul, becoming lively again, as if imbued with life. "The Lord I believe in, the existence this town believes in, He is the ruler of the stars, the symbol of heaviness and density, the controller of fundamental forces, and the law of the boundless starry sky. He exists outside the world, the most great existence. He was born from the beginning, and ends at the last. He protects Black Vortex Town, allowing every resident who believes in him here to eventually become the stars we can see. We believe in him, faithfully believe in him. He makes the tide rise and fall, makes the sun and moon rise and set normally from east to west. He controls gravity, regulates the weather. He gives us abundant harvests and also destroys us. As Klein was complaining in his heart, his spiritual intuition suddenly warned him. This was a very frantic warning, one that exceeded the limits of Klein's endurance, like an unarmed ordinary person suddenly encountering a group of hungry tigers in the wild. Klein's pupils suddenly widened. He reached out his hand, subconsciously wanting to interrupt the prayer the person in front of him was constantly uttering and chanting. His name is Supernova. No, stop him. Before Klein finished speaking, the old man's voice abruptly stopped. The old man's eyes bulged out, wide open. His excited expression suddenly froze on his face, but it was covered with a layer of haze and gray, looking even more terrifying than before. Then, Ryan watched as the old man's head slowly fell. The head hit the ground heavily, and blood sprayed out wildly from his severed neck at this moment, covering the ground, walls, tables, chairs, and benches everywhere. Anderson had appeared behind the old man at some point. He held a knife, avoiding the warm, foul-smelling blood filled with the smell of rust that was constantly spraying out from the separated body. This Sequence 5 hunter, without hesitation, made sure the words that had not yet been spoken were swallowed back into the mouth of this believer of an evil god. He was using ancient Hermes. Anderson squatted down, using the old man's clothes to wipe the knife in his hand, and explained to Klein and Furs, who were already stunned, letting him say it would be very troublesome. Everyone in this town spoke ancient Hermes. Klein and Furs knew the danger of ancient Hermes, so there was no need to elaborate. I think I know whose church this is. Anderson finished wiping the blood off the knife, a smile returning to his face, and said to Klein and Furs. Klein glanced at the old man who had been taken care of with one strike, then his gaze fell on Anderson, who was holding the knife. Whose? There's a secret order on the South Continent in recent years called the Singularity Sect. They believe that everything in the world originated from a point of infinite mass and infinitesimal volume. Anderson paused here before continuing. What they believe in seems to be the so-called ruler of the stars. Chapter 294,293 Whirlpool. On the South Continent, a sect that believes in the stars, and thinks that everything in this world originated from a point of infinite mass and infinitely small volume. As a double major top student in the history and language departments at Tingen University, plus a month of high-intensity mysticism study, Klein had never heard of such a realistic, Big Bang theory, until now. After all, according to this world's worldview and the accepted origin of the world, the Creator awoke from chaos, created the first ray of light, and transformed into all things. His body became the earth and the stars, one of his eyes became the sun, and the other turned into the crimson moon, his blood became the seas and rivers, nourishing and nurturing life. Such an unmystical explanation, are they not afraid of death? It's even called the Singularity Sect. This is practically writing, I am a transmigrator, come find me, all over their face, right? Senior Transmigrator, have you already expanded your business to the South Continent? Rosal the Great. As everyone knows, Rosal the Great and the South Continent don't seem to have much connection. Klein's expression turned a bit strange. Anderson just chuckled when he saw it. How about it? It's a very strange theory. You haven't heard of it, right? Indeed, I haven't heard of this theory in this world. Klein thought honestly. Seeing that both Klein and Furs looked like they had never heard of it, Anderson grinned, then casually picked up the candlestick that had fallen to the ground but strangely remained burning, waved his hand casually, and said, well, indeed, many people haven't heard of it. He glanced at the head rolling on the ground and the headless corpse, shrugging indifferently. I just happened to hear someone mention it, I only know the name. As for the specifics about the Singularity Sect, he smiled, I'm not too clear either. Klein, Furs opened their mouths. Klein and Furs, who were preparing to listen to Anderson's explanation, couldn't help but feel anger rise in their hearts. What are you saying all this for? Are you messing with us? Who was that? How are you guys so rustic? Look just now for. Let's search for things in the church. There should be some kind of item. Such an important location, and so unique, there must be something we're supposed to find. Anderson smiled, answering Klein and Fur's seemingly unspoken words with his expression. I didn't say I was very clear about it. Klein and Furs, hearing this, the few of them had no choice but to search through the things in this church. Putting everything else aside, there were many things here, very jumbled, but they all seemed useless. Neither Furs nor Anderson were skilled in divination. Anderson's danger intuition could help him avoid some messy things, but this would also indirectly make him miss clues that could pass the test. Therefore, the final decision on what could be taken needed to be made by Klein, who was skilled in divination. While determining which things were problematic and which were not, and considering the strangeness of this church, after discussing with Furs and Anderson, and after basically confirming what could be taken and what was worthless, Klein took out the 3 candles he brought, lit them in a corner of the church, and set up a wall of spirituality. Standing inside the wall of spirituality, Klein whispered, quickly praying in ancient Hermes. Black night goddess, more exalted than the starry sky, more ancient than eternity. I pray for the power of night, I pray for the power of concealment, I pray for the goddess's favor. I pray that all hidden things in this church will be revealed before me. Considering the possibility of things that could affect their spiritual intuition, leading to oversight and omissions, Klein used ritual magic very cautiously to pray for the goddess's power. After all, this was a professional ritual magic level test, not something like a game dungeon. While clearing it, they also had to think about how to perform. Outside the wall of spirituality, Furs looked at this rather orthodox ritual magic directed towards a true god, and touched her pocket, which also contained a few candles. And just as Klein was whispering the incantation quickly, activating the corresponding ritual symbols, her intuition stirred because of it, and she looked towards the front of the church, behind the strange sacred radiance that stood there, seemingly symbolizing density, the stars, and fundamental force. Behind the strange sacred radiance, in a hazy darkness, a crimson light suddenly appeared, like an oracle guiding believers, drawing the attention of both Furs and Anderson, who discovered the problem. That was something hidden. Anderson quickly stepped forward, glanced at the object presented within the glowing crimson light spot, then smiled and took it out from behind the strange sacred radiance. It was an old, worn-out diary that looked ancient. Klein, who had finished the ritual magic and dispelled the wall of spirituality, was also silent when he saw that thing. Senior, this strong scent of online game puzzle solving is really hitting him in the face. After Klein and his group left the church in the heavy rain, the body of the killed, the stars, believer suddenly twitched. Subsequently, his bones, muscles, organs, blood, and skin all began to tremble uncontrollably, as if every cell, every bone, every blood vessel was being lifted by countless ethereal transparent threads, and a puppeteer was readjusting to the new puppet body in his hands. On the head that had rolled to the side, the eyes that refused to close in death were, at some point, covered with a misty color. After the body wriggled for a while, the body of this, the stars, believer suddenly stood up. The headless torso tremblingly picked up its head from nearby, but it didn't seem to have any intention of pressing it onto its forehead. Whirlpool, whirlpool, the whirlpool has already formed. The stars, believer, whose eyes were covered with a strange gray color, muttered to himself. His limbs twitched and began to twist. The head was held by the body at the navel. At this moment, the shriveled, weak hands had already bent and twisted. The headless corpse was no longer holding its own head, yet the head did not fall off on its own just because the body was no longer holding it. The head, with its eyes wide open in death, eerily began to merge with the corpse behind it from the point of contact, as if the severed neck of the head had regrown onto the stomach. However, it wasn't just like this, or rather, it wasn't only like this. The headless corpse's stomach split open, and countless pink, tender granulation tissues grew out from inside. Those pink, tender granulation tissues grabbed the head with its eyes wide open in death, firmly embedding it within its body. His limbs were elongated and twisted and spun in a clockwise direction. It turned into a new monster, reborn. The head located at the center of the whirlpool-like twisted limbs watched the group walking further and further away, slowly, sinisterly, revealing a row of black teeth. The whirlpool has long since formed. Klein translated the notebook in his hand with some difficulty as he walked. This wasn't to say the ancient Hermes on it was obscure and difficult to translate, rather, every character on it seemed to have its own will, constantly jumping around, and when it was opened, it was all garbled text. This should be part of the puzzle-solving segment, although this ancient Hermes. Furs offered to help first, but after looking at the messy, constantly jumping ancient Hermes characters, her eyes quickly started seeing spirals. What is all this? It requires divination, or corresponding ritual magic directed towards knowledge, to be interpreted in the correct order. Klein answered concisely. Anderson, standing beside him, held an umbrella for Klein to prevent the rain from wetting the notebook, while Klein held a gold coin, performing divination and interpreting the notebook in his hand, constantly translating it into the corresponding Ruin language words in his mind. On the first day in this town, I established the first church belonging to the stars, to guide the children in the sea. Single quote. Single quote. The stars are great, they are heavy, they are our father and our mother, it is they who give us everything. Single quote. Single quote. On the last day in this town, the stars return to their positions, the whirlpool restarts, the door is about to open once again, all things will return to chaos, return to the singularity. Ah, great Lord, this day is approaching. By then, all your children will awaken, and will return to your divine kingdom. Door. The contents of this diary were very jumbled. Compared to a regular diary used to record daily events, such as Rosal the Great's diary, Klein was more inclined to believe this diary was a combination of a church priest's daily work summary and daily praise of God. In other words, each large section didn't contain much effective content, and the more Klein read, the dizzier his head felt. It seemed his mental state was also affected by these words. He only selectively read a few paragraphs at the very beginning and very end, quickly filtering the information. The rest. The door opens once every 60 years, the time is approaching, the children of the stars are awakening. The children of the stars are awakening. Klein carefully examined this sentence, and a bad premonition arose spontaneously. Strange. At this moment, Furs suddenly frowned. What's wrong? Klein, whose brain reaction seemed a bit sluggish due to focusing on interpreting the notebook, raised his head and looked at Furs. Furs stared at Klein and Anderson and said uncertainly, "Don't you think your hair is a bit longer than when we first entered Black Vortex Town?" Hair longer than when they were about to enter Black Vortex Town. Klein was stunned for a moment. Anderson also looked at Klein's hair, narrowing his eyes. Indeed, it is a bit longer than before, and the ends of the hair were a bit curled. Furs reached out to tidy her hair and also saw the ends of her hair curling upwards, like an unformed whirlpool shape. Whirlpool. You should have also seen quite a few things related to whirlpools. Seeing this, Anderson breathed a sigh of relief and said slowly. Whether it was the ancient Hermes on the station sign that started twisting when they first arrived at the station, or the giant chimney and the formation of the whirlpool in the sky at the first stop, Uncle's funeral, everything seemed related to the concept of whirlpool. Furs made a reasonable guess. Constantly emphasizing a concept, a symbol, could that indicate that the abnormality of this town is essentially related to the concept of whirlpool? There is that possibility. Anderson thought for a moment and replied, things that heavily emphasize symbolic meaning are usually only encountered in places with strong religious overtones, or by beyonders with corresponding supernatural abilities who come into contact with related mysticism matters. The stars, that this town believes in is the former, but it could also be the latter. Then the matter of their hair starting to grow longer and curl is not a good sign. Klein took the notebook and returned to the family woven for him by this identity, preparing to continue completing his task. His spirituality points, excluding the 20 points forcibly deducted at the beginning for completing the task, plus the 7 points automatically lost upon hearing the strange priest's prayer in the church, and the 5 points deducted for translating the notebook, had stabilized at 75 after a period of rest. And according to Anderson's suggestion, it was best for their spirituality points to remain above 90 before interacting with those strange locations and recording the corresponding abnormalities. Otherwise, without being sure if there was anything here that could stabilize their mental state, losing spirituality points was equivalent to chronic suicide. Once it dropped to a certain level, it wouldn't automatically recover. Currently, Klein returned home, firstly for the coffin in the home, and secondly to get some materials needed for ritual magic. He wanted to use ritual magic to pray to the source of knowledge to quickly decipher what was written in the notebook and find clues from it. Phew, he remembered the test question hint he saw at the beginning. Location 4. Home, there is a coffin here, do you want to lie in it? Putting the words, home, and coffin together, there wouldn't be red coffins, white coffins, all sorts of coffins placed at home, and then brides, water ghosts, or similar things lying inside, right? Klein's body shivered. Losing spirituality points and gradually succumbing to madness indeed makes one prone to wild thoughts, huh? In the Euclidean space, Tang said, "Ah," then looked at Nicola beside him with a smile. "My cryptic servant potion has begun to digest significantly. It seems the Lord of the Mysteries really likes the story I prepared. This should be the final digestion process. Honestly, it's a bit regrettable." Tang propped his chin with his hand and smacked his lips. "I thought it would take a while longer. It seems my potion will be completely digested when the test ends." Nicola glanced at a certain ball of light not far away, his mouth twitched slightly, but in the end, he just sighed softly. What a sin. Chapter 295, 294 Various Anomalies. At his home, in the town, Klein found the materials he needed, set up the ritual in the Wall of Spirituality, and prepared to use ritual magic to pray to the existence that is the source of knowledge, mystery of madness, demon of wisdom, and destination of all knowledge. In the various outlines and honorific names of ritual magic, compiled, organized, and summarized by Miskatonic University, many honorific names involving hidden existences have been proven to provide a certain degree of assistance to those performing the ritual. Of course, this also requires the ritualist to strictly adhere to the various rules when establishing contact with these hidden existences. Otherwise, if the rules are violated and a malicious response is received, it will be a fatal blow for ritualists and beyonders of low sequence. With the help of 3 candles in ritual magic, Klein received a response from the source of knowledge. The dilapidated notebook moved without wind, and strings of moving text on it began to arrange themselves according to a normal, logical pattern. The ritual magic began to automatically parse the jumbled contents of this strange notebook. Watching the text constantly twist and finally settle down on the dilapidated notebook, Klein let out a long breath. Now I just need to wait. As for the problems in this house, I'll deal with them after my mental value recovers to the safe line. In a place like this, it's definitely right to play it safe. While examining the items in this house to see if there was anything he needed, Klein waited for the ritual magic to complete. Klein did not notice that in his reflection in a mirror on the desk, his hair was growing longer and longer, and the whirlpool at the end was gradually forming. The surrounding objects were slowly and subtly shifting their positions, revolving around Klein. 3 hours later, Black Vortex Town, Hospital. Furs, whose mental value was stable at 90, recalled her current identity in the hospitalized older sister, mentioned in her exam question, and gently exhaled a breath of stale air. In the horror novels written by Rosal the Great, places like schools and hospitals are hotbeds for horror incidents. To be honest, this was a huge problem. If Furs had come alone, she would have wanted to turn around and leave the moment she saw this place, which looked creepy from the outside, let alone entering it. Anderson held a camera as big as half his head, still looking leisurely. "Does the little girl find this place very scary?" he asked with a smile. Furs's mouth twitched. To be honest, she felt her hands itching a little. Furs took a deep breath, chanting to herself, "I have to face it sooner or later." Rosal the Great said it's better to die early and be reborn. After psyching herself up, Furs finally lifted her heavy legs, took a step forward, and walked into the hospital. Anderson followed closely behind. The two walked into the hospital, a high-risk area that clearly seemed to be a hotbed for horror incidents. The equipment in the hospital was very old. It wasn't as clean and bright as St. Peter's Hospital in Tingen City, and there were no elevators manufactured by the Mechanical Engineering Department of Tingen University for them to use. However, this hospital in Black Vortex Town was not the eerie, terrifying, abandoned hospital described in the novels Furs had read. It was just an ordinary town hospital, with nothing strange about it. It was very normal, but being normal, in this 3-level examination venue, seemed somewhat abnormal. After Furs and Anderson asked a nurse where the obstetrics and gynecology department was, they moved upstairs via the stairs to the floor where it was located. "Mr. Hood, where do you think the anomaly in the hospital will manifest?" As a newcomer to the world of mysticism who only enjoyed writing and lacked sufficient experience and knowledge, Furs was very good at assessing the situation. Moreover, it wasn't embarrassing to ask for guidance from a higher-level beyander in this situation. "If it's related to the whirlpool," Anderson mused for a moment, seemingly associating something with Furs's task. His expression became momentarily strange, then returned to its usual appearance. There are actually many things related to the whirlpool in a place like a hospital, but considering your task is in the obstetrics and gynecology department, the focus should be on, he pondered for a moment, and said, on infants. Infants. Furz's expression also became a little strange, but before she could think of what about infants could be related to the whirlpool, they had already arrived on the obstetrics and gynecology floor of the hospital. Looking at the equally ordinary hospital corridor, Furz still couldn't figure out the connection between infants and the whirlpool. Anderson glanced at the corridor and said, "There shouldn't be any danger now. You go see your sister first, and then we'll discuss this issue, how about that?" "Okay." Furz quickly composed herself. She found her sister's room, paused at the door, and then, as if gathering her courage, pushed the door open and walked in. Anderson, holding his camera, watched through the observation window as Furz interacted with a lady lying in bed, dressed as a pregnant woman with a heavily bumped belly, and silently gagged. This place is truly sickening. What was the person who created this place thinking? So many messy things, they can't kill people, but they can disgust them to death. The smile on his face had disappeared. Thinking of what he had associated earlier, Anderson felt his mind was also getting dirty. If that's the case, the symbolic meaning of this place has probably reached the demigod level, sequence 3, sequence 2, or even sequence 1. Or perhaps, Furz chatted with her sister in this identity, but didn't uncover anything valuable. But she said the late night snack tonight was delicious. Furz came out and told Anderson, "This should be a hint. Then we'll wait until night." Anderson had already composed himself. He patted the camera in his hand. Hopefully Mr. Moretti can decipher the notebook he has as soon as possible. We need some useful clues, and, Miss Wall, don't you think our hair is getting longer and longer? Furz was startled. She looked at her reflection in the window of the hospital corridor and saw that her hair was a full half longer than when she first entered Black Vortex Town. Her expression became even more solemn. She was the first to notice the hair problem, but she didn't know when her attention had been drawn to the surrounding things. Is this a characteristic of the whirlpool symbol? Perhaps this is a time limit. For example, after our hair gets too long, we'll be strangled to death by the whirlpool's hair. Furz took out her handwritten notebook and quickly jotted down a passage to avoid forgetting it later. That possibility cannot be ruled out. Anderson shrugged. In short, everything related to the whirlpool in this town should be problematic. And this shouldn't be limited to the things and people here. Even as outsiders, the longer we stay here, the more likely we are to experience corresponding problems. So, a question arises. Anderson smiled at Furz, then calmly stated a situation that made Furz feel a chill down her spine. Do you think our fingerprints are a type of whirlpool? And are our cochleas a type of whirlpool? Since everything here is transforming into a whirlpool, the words on the train platform, the ashes produced after a person is burned, the clouds in the sky, the mother's placenta, the human body itself, then why wouldn't the whirlpools that are already on their bodies be affected? Klein looked at the notebook, which was almost completely laid out with the help of ritual magic. After selecting the key points, he prepared to transcribe the somewhat obscure and difficult ancient Hermes into Ruin language. While organizing the information in his hands, Klein flipped through the pages one by one, his pen constantly sliding across the paper, recording Ruin characters one after another. And the more he read and translated, the more solemn Klein's expression became. At this moment, he didn't notice that at some point, the sounds of "Mom" that should have been constantly coming from outside the room door had stopped. The Church of the Stars guided the children lost in the starry sky and the sea, thus, the town was established and gradually prospered. We jointly teach the language of the stars. In the prayers and praises of the children, the great master of the stars grants us strength, bestowing upon us power from the tides. The whirlpool sleeps beneath the ground. It is the bridge through which the great master of the stars communicates with us. It is the door, and the door is it. It is the collection of everything in the world, and also the child of all the stars in the sea, the child of all planets, the destination where all travelers in the starry sky, the children of the master, will surely return. And every 60 years, the whirlpool will appear. At that time, the children of the starry sky and the children of the sea lost here will also awaken and return to the embrace of the master. When he read this, Klein rubbed the paper in his hands. Just as he was about to turn the page to continue reading and try to find more information about the whirlpool, he suddenly heard a clatter, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. Klein quickly put away the things in his hand, and after standing up, immediately drew a revolver from his holster. As a member of the Night Watchers in Tingen City, Klein believed his marksmanship was decent after practicing for a month. He hadn't forgotten that there was a big problem waiting for him to deal with in this home. Touching the bracelet with 12 segments on his wrist, and confirming that his mental value was stable at 87, Klein took a slight breath to calm himself down. The main event is next. Then, Klein took out a ruined gold coin, flicked it, and performed a simple divination. After confirming that there was no immediate danger outside the door, he slowly opened the door with a cold gaze and walked out. Before entering this 3-level examination venue, Klein felt that his diviner potion had been almost digested. Perhaps after leaving the venue, he could fully digest the diviner potion and prepare for the next sequence, the clown potion and its corresponding acting. After pushing open the room door, the corridor, where no mineral lamp was lit, was dim. The pouring rain outside covered up many sounds and anomalies. Klein held the revolver, and in his hand was a candle that he had used as a ritual symbol earlier. He lit it, and the dim yellow flame dispelled the darkness in the corridor, but the rain outside grew heavier and heavier, pouring down onto the ground, the sound echoing far away in the empty, deserted house. Klein was not affected by this. He continued walking forward until he reached the kitchen, where he finally stopped. Klein heard some faint breathing sounds. Although these breathing sounds were covered by the rain and could not be heard without listening closely, Klein directly confirmed the presence of someone in the kitchen through divination. I remember, this identity's mom was still busy in the kitchen when I came back. Slowly pushing open the half-closed kitchen door, Klein's gaze swept across the kitchen, which was also unlit. The rain outside grew heavier and heavier, the pattering raindrops hitting the window with a deafening sound. He didn't see anyone. There wasn't a single figure in the kitchen. Klein's gaze swept around, then fell on a large basin on the ground. He pushed the kitchen door open wider. After walking into the kitchen, Klein looked at the large basin, his candle and revolver both ready. Klein's breathing was slightly hurried. The sound of breathing seemed to be coming from that basin. He immediately had a bad premonition. Klein. Suddenly, a faint call came from the large basin. Klein's gaze froze. He saw two hands, stretched out like noodles, slowly extending from the large basin. They swayed towards Klein, seemingly wanting to pull him in and drag him into the basin as well. Klein. I feel a little uncomfortable, am I sick? Klein. I'm so uncomfortable, it's so crowded here. Klein. It was a woman who had twisted herself up, her bones and muscles completely torn, constantly bending and twisting from her feet, finally forming a whirlpool-like shape. Klein. Mom hurts so much. Klein. Warning to examinee 007121, your mental value is decreasing due to observing an indescribable object. Current mental value, 67. Examinee 007121, you have completed the recording of the anomalies in the house. Current exam progress, 2/5. Chapter 296, 295 Shifting Blame. It was night. The gloomy darkness swallowed all the light from the ore lamps on the streets of Black Vortex Town. The torrential rain pressed heavily onto the ground, and the puddles gradually grew. The water flowing into the central lake of Black Vortex Town and the sea seemed about to trigger a flash flood, with deep and shallow puddles everywhere on the ground. After the sun set, in a world without light, the sound of the pouring rain had somehow masked everything that was happening in Black Vortex Town. In the town's only hospital, Furs stared blankly at the bizarre plants that were constantly and wantonly growing in the obstetrics and gynecology director's office. She didn't try to escape, seemingly brain-dead and unable to think about anything anymore. In the lounge next to the obstetrics and gynecology director's office, a pregnant woman lay stiffly on the operating table. The obstetrics and gynecology director, wearing transparent gloves and holding a sharp scalpel, was cutting open the pregnant woman's belly. The pregnant woman didn't flinch or avoid him, just stared blankly and foolishly at the ceiling, giggling idiotically. Blood gurgled out from the pregnant woman's belly. On the blood-soaked sheet, on the doctor's hands, clothes, and scalpel, the blood didn't seem to congeal. Instead, as if it had found soil to grow in, one spiral-patterned mushroom after another drilled out from the pregnant woman's cut-open belly and grew vigorously. The spiral-patterned mushrooms grew rampant. When the mycelium touched the doctor's scalpel, it wrapped around it tightly, then quickly grew larger, forming mushroom caps, and once again became a mushroom with strange spiral-patterned caps. Under the pregnant woman's bed, Wherever the doctor holding the scalpel had been soaked by the blood flowing out from the pregnant woman's cut-open belly, lush mushrooms grew, turning into a jungle of mushrooms. When Furs saw this scene, she was completely numb. It wasn't just the days brought on by her constantly decreasing mental value, but also the bloody scene before her that made Furs feel physically uncomfortable. Although she wasn't a rookie in the world of mysticism, this kind of R-rated scene truly made Furs feel immense psychological nausea. It's food, it's food, 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 food. The door to the obstetrics and gynecology director's office was being pounded on. The pregnant women who should have been waiting in their own rooms to give birth were now pounding on the office door with crazed expressions. They wanted to break in, yelling, "Food," and "midnight snack," while constantly slamming their bodies against the not-so-sturdy office door. This door wouldn't hold much longer. Anderson glanced at Furs, who was frozen in place, and quickly made a decision. He grabbed Furs's collar and yanked her backward. Even now, seeing such an incredible and disgusting thing at the same time and both losing 20 points of mental value, Anderson's condition was still much better than Furs's. With more experience, knowledge, and a higher sequence and pathway than Furs, this Sequence 9 apprentice, Anderson maintained a basic level of rationality even when encountering things that caused a rapid drop in mental value. "Let's leave here first and meet up with Moretti." A dagger appeared in his hand at some point. Anderson turned around and kicked open the door to the director's office. The door fell backward, pinning the crazed pregnant women outside and also exposing the countless patterned mushrooms that had grown from the blood inside. Instantly, the sweet scent of mushrooms and the smell of blood seemed to stimulate the pregnant women outside, and their strength suddenly became immense. It seemed like the next second, they would directly lift the door from the ground, rush in, tear apart the troublesome Anderson and Furs, and chew and devour the delicious, palatable food on the ground. But Anderson didn't give these pregnant women this chance. His gaze sharpened, and he strode forward, kicking down on the door that was still pressing on the pregnant women, sinking it down several more centimeters. The pregnant women's eyes seemed to bulge out, and the pressure left them with no strength to resist. Seeing this scene, Anderson didn't hesitate at all. Before the remaining uncontrolled pregnant women could come forward, his body seemed to turn into a fiery red spear, instantly streaking through the obstetrics and gynecology corridor, pulling the stunned, dazed Furs, and reaching the staircase at the other end of the corridor. Go! Furs was carried by Anderson, stumbling rapidly down the stairs. With the loud shouts of, "Hey! Hey!" from the first-floor nurses behind them, they rushed into the rain curtain without looking back, disappearing into the vast rainy night. Furs was now being carried on Anderson's shoulder. She lifted her head, her eyes seemingly piercing through the walls, and saw that inside the director's office, which was damaged by Anderson's actions, a group of pregnant women had filed in and were eagerly chewing on things that were constantly growing out of another pregnant woman's body, resembling mushrooms but with caps like a whirlpool. Delicious, delicious, so delicious. Ha ha ha, this is the most delicious, most nutritious dinner tonight. Furs's belly was placed on Anderson's shoulder, bouncing convulsively. She couldn't help it and threw up directly in the torrential rain. Anderson's expression changed slightly, but in the end, he didn't throw Furs off directly. He sped away into the night at an unnatural speed. And in the pouring rain, a figure was also running wildly at a dark intersection without streetlights. Behind him was a pile of deformed, boneless, worm-like humans. Time rewound a few hours earlier. Seeing the face in the large basin, a face Klein had just seen not long ago, now writhing bizarrely, like a snail trying to escape from its shell, extending its hands and constantly calling out Klein's name. This scene was truly too shocking. Klein suppressed the urge to vomit, enduring the instant deduction of 20 points of mental value, and raised his gun expressionlessly. The revolver was accurately aimed at the monster in the large basin. Then Klein pulled the trigger without hesitation. With several bangs, bullets were fired without restraint into the body of this snail-like monster. The yellow bullets flew rapidly through the air, entering the monster's body without it noticing. With a shrill scream, several blood holes appeared on the body of the snail monster residing in the large basin, right in front of Klein. Blood gurgled out from the blood holes. The twisted and ferocious monster dragged its seemingly boneless body, continuing to extend its hands towards Klein. It wasn't dead yet, it was terrifyingly tenacious. "Klein, why are you hurting? Mommy, Klein, son." A handful of powder appeared in Klein's hand. The powder was still dazzling in the dark kitchen, like the sun, incomparably warm. That was the Sunwell ore powder he had found in the room of this identity. Sunwell ore is an excellent casting material and a high-level sacrificial item corresponding to the sun domain in ritual magic, symbolizing purification, exorcism, destruction, light, etc. It can yield more powerful ritual magic feedback more quickly in ritual magic. Only after performing the corresponding ritual magic beforehand and transforming these casting materials into charms that could be carried around and would not weaken in effect for half an hour, gradually decreasing in effect after half an hour, did Klein dare to explore this obviously problematic map alone. Otherwise, he would never have just walked out of his room so rashly with just a revolver, he would have run away long ago. Klein. The light of the sun flickered and exploded in the dark and cramped kitchen. The monster that had extended its hand from the large basin could only let out its final wail in the afterglow of the sun. Along with its body, which had already been shot through with several large holes, it finally unwillingly turned into ashes after being scorched by the sun. After the dazzling sunlight dissipated, Klein, holding the candle, finally let out a long breath. Indeed, although on the surface, the concept of the whirlpool doesn't have dark or evil characteristics, meaning ritual magic in the sun domain cannot have a significant impact on the concept of the whirlpool. The monsters that have turned into whirlpools can be harmed by the purification and exorcism of the sun pathway. After all, a place similar to a game dungeon shouldn't have useless items. When Klein saw a small pile of familiar sun well powder in his room, he already thought of using ritual magic from the sun domain to try and expel, harm, or even kill these monsters. And now, it was clear that he had succeeded. One had to admit, sometimes playing a game with the same game mindset could give him a considerable advantage. Seeing the last bit of the sun's afterglow disappear completely and the monster in the basin remaining motionless, Klein then walked over, holding the revolver that had fired several shots. After seeing that only a pile of completely burned ashes remained in the large basin, Klein put away the revolver in his hand. Phew, luckily there wasn't any surprise counterattack plot, otherwise I would have had to fire a few more shots. The items that could be carried in the professional ritual magic level test were quite limited. Things like grade 2 inches sealed artifacts or grade 1 inch sealed artifacts were completely out of the question, they couldn't even get in. Only things like candles and revolvers with no attack power could be brought in, and even then, they were quite limited. After this round of facing the monster directly, Klein finally understood why a revolver, which could still pose a certain threat to low and mid-sequence beyonders, was rated as an item without offensive capability. Because the things here simply couldn't be killed in a normal way. After counting the remaining items in his hand, just as Klein lifted his foot, preparing to go to other places to check the situation and search for other useful clues, several extremely faint breathing sounds came from the dark corridor outside the kitchen. Klein, where are you, Klein? Hearing these familiar yet somewhat strange voices, Klein's breath hitched. He subconsciously hurried to the kitchen door, held up the candle, and shined it outside. More than a dozen large basins had been placed in the empty, dark, and cramped corridor at some point. From each of those large basins stretched out thin, long arms that seemed to have no joints, exactly like the thing in the kitchen that Klein had dealt with using a handful of sunwell powder. So, you're here. As if sensing a living person, a head emerged from one of the basins. Klein looked closely, and the head illuminated by the candle was precisely the person he had seen comforting the mommy, who had turned into a monster at that strange funeral not long ago. The more than a dozen basins here contained the relatives of mommy and uncle. They, too, had become part of the whirlpool. Run. Only this one thought remained in Klein's mind. After the monsters discovered him, Klein slammed the door shut with a bang. He didn't have much sunwell ore powder left, and the remaining sunwell ore powder would definitely not be enough to deal with the monsters in front of him. Klein no longer cared if there were any other useful clues here. His body shot forward abruptly. Before the kitchen door behind him was pushed open by the monsters, Klein's body crashed through the kitchen window and fell into the torrential rain. In the rainy night, Klein ran forward desperately. He had already extinguished the candle and stuffed it into his pocket, and the old notebook, whose text had been neatly arranged by ritual magic, also lay quietly in Klein's arms. Klein, don't go, Klein, become a part of us, Klein. We are all children of the stars, Klein. Who are your damn children of the stars? Klein ran wildly, but the voices behind him didn't get farther away because of this, instead, they got closer. Klein made a decisive decision, threw out a little sunwell powder, and illuminated the area behind him. He turned his head to look, gasped, and then his steps became even faster. Behind him, several things that looked like snakes but had human heads, twisted and deformed limbs, and seemed boneless, were chasing after him. Klein felt like cursing. As a logistics person, Klein knew that his stamina would definitely not be able to support him for long. Therefore, he had to find a way to shake them off, or eliminate them directly. When flames suddenly rose in the distance, indicating a direction, Klein's steps paused slightly. He gritted his teeth, quickened his pace towards the hospital, and ran towards it. Chapter 297, 296 Logging into Reality. And while many were struggling with the monsters and mutated things in the examination hall, within the Euclidean space, numerous light clusters floating in midair, some suddenly dimmed. Looks about right. Tang glanced sideways, passing over the light cluster representing Black Vortex Town, in front of him, his gaze falling upon another light cluster not far away. Within the light cluster, countless ugly, bloodthirsty, crazed zombies, who were still relentlessly pursuing people even after death, were currently besieging a small team. Only a few people were left in the team, but facing thousands upon thousands of zombies, their faces remained calm, like soldiers who had long accepted their fate, advancing and retreating in order, constantly using various Beyonder abilities to kill the zombies. But there were simply too many zombies here, their deaths were not true deaths. The virus within them would constantly make them stand up again, reviving and returning. This was a tragic battle that seemed endless, with only failure as the outcome. The team had retreated near the government building, the number of zombies had only increased. The entire city had become a zombie lair. Death, for these living dead, had long lost its original meaning. For monsters that had lost their self-awareness and only knew how to bite and devour, death was not the end, but rebirth. As the development within the examination hall reached such a critical juncture, the light cluster gradually dimmed, seemingly about to disappear from the Euclidean space, eliminating all candidates. Tang flicked the historical void image monocle he wore in his right eye socket. Reflected in the monocle, a large ball of light suddenly shot up into the sky from in front of the government building. A large-scale ritualistic magic. This team of candidates, led by a saint from the Eternal Blazing Sun Church, a sequence 4 No Darkness, had gathered all the items required for a level 2 ritualistic magic test. They prayed to the eternal blazing sun for scorching sunlight that would burn and pulverize even the newly reborn. The light ascended above Raccoon City, a city that had been completely swallowed by countless zombies, and bloomed with light. The light was so dazzling, so scorching, that even Tang, separated by several layers, couldn't help but squint his eyes. The eternal blazing sun was exerting influence from afar. Raccoon City, Level 2, Ritualistic Magic Test Examination Hall confirmed closed, examination ended. The light cluster instantly dimmed. Within the Euclidean space, the light cluster that had been suspended began to sink downwards, touching the ground, and being absorbed by it. But this did not mean that the inherent value of this examination hall had come to an end. Nicola raised his top hat. This young man who controlled error smiled as he looked at the vast, seemingly worldwide reflection of the area before him. Brilliant specks of light emerged from Tang's body. As the highest-ranking magician currently existing, he extended his hand and snapped his fingers in midair. The magic show is about to begin. Under the authority of deception and fooling, what was happening in the Euclidean space was logging into the real world in a dimension-reducing manner. Although in the ritualistic magic examination, most of the NPCs in all examination halls are my marionettes, there are always unexpected situations in everything. The Euclidean space is a collection of information, observed, by the real world, spirit world, and star realm to some extent. After Tang was promoted to Sequence 1, Seer of Mysteries, he had long grasped the core secret of this space. Reality is mapped into the Euclidean space, and some things that happen within the Euclidean space, when certain conditions are met, can also be synchronously mapped into reality. So, besides the vast majority of marionettes that can be reused, what are the rest of those things? Under the connection of inherently strong symbolic relevance, utilizing the authority of grafting and error can maximize this connection. For error and fool, such strongly associated things are essentially equivalent to the main body. destroying the corresponding symbols in the Euclidean space, and the Euclidean space synchronously mapping into the real world, can also destroy the evil, defiled things in the followers of evil gods that exist in the real world. Then, with a bang, the world fell silent. Real world, Ruin Kingdom, Backland. A rose school vampire, enjoying the beauty of the red moon, held a wine glass. In the glass was a fine wine, made from the fresh blood squeezed from young girls. This vampire chuckled as he sipped the wine, saying it's dangerous to stay outside, it's just a boring trick by those cowards. The bright red blood was played with by this vampire in the wine glass. As he looked at the scarlet moon in the sky and wanted to mock the cowards in his heart, his thoughts had not yet completely settled when a spiritual warning suddenly caused him to transform into many bats. What's going on? The vampire was astonished, but he had no time to think further. It was as if an invisible large hand casually grabbed the vampire's fate, guiding him towards a future that was bound to happen. Reality connects with the Euclidean space. The Raccoon City ending, sun's brilliance, is about to be loaded into reality. Scorching sunlight silently lit up within the many bats that the vampire had transformed into. The vampire's pupils dilated, countless bats flapped their wings and flew out of the wide-open window, but each of them, after flying for a short distance, was as if their bodies could no longer contain the sunlight within, being stretched open by the incredibly hot sunlight, lighting up in the night sky of Backland, like a small sun rising in the middle of the night. All of the vampire's avatars, along with his main body, exploded. The scorching sun burned all the surrounding shadows, purifying the defilement. In the end, nothing was left except for a few shreds of clothing. Similar scenes were happening in many places. Silent Hill, Level 1, Ritualistic Magic Test Examination Hall confirmed closed, examination ended. Within the Euclidean space, the light cluster symbolizing this examination hall sank, immersed into the ground, and began to disappear. In a world of countless falling ashes, huge thunderclaps, accompanied by a storm and tornado like a natural disaster, raged through the town, which was like an isolated island. Monsters were swept up, all buildings were vulnerable in the face of the true natural disaster, the boundary between the inner and outer worlds was broken, and a little girl in blue, expressionless, looked at the storm church angel in the sky who was scattering spirituality, creating one storm and tornado after another. Reality connects with the Euclidean space. The Silent Hill ending, natural disaster has arrived, is about to be loaded into reality. Through grafting, fooling, and error, this was reflected in reality. The vengeful spirits and apostle of desire who were not protected by the power of the desire mother tree were instantly torn apart, struck into charcoal, and died with their eyes wide open. Until their deaths, they didn't understand why they had hidden so perfectly, some even baffling official beyonders, causing them headaches, yet at this moment, they were collectively subjected to punishment. Only a few received the protection of the desire mother tree and were not instantly turned into minced meat and charcoal by the dimension-reducing dimensional strike. Under this level of dimensional strike, even saints would find it difficult to simultaneously resist the symbols that had developed strong associations with them through observation, and the final fate that was grafted onto them using error and fooling when the symbols were destroyed. Everything seemed futile and meaningless. Tang squeezed his monocle, playing with the translucent fool mask in his hand. It's best to kill as many of these chaotic evil god followers as possible before the apocalypse arrives. Of course, normally he prefers to hang these guys up as marionettes, but occasionally changing tastes is also acceptable for Tang. But it wasn't without things that counterattacked using the symbols mapped from the Euclidean space. North Continent, within a very hidden altar. Power bearing the aura of the Desire Mother Tree descended, causing the believers of this great existence around the altar to either secrete pus from their bodies, have their facial features like eyes and noses change positions, or transform into the forms of rabbits, skinny pigs, sheep, etc., or suffer under curses and torment, constantly wailing in pain. They endured the aura of the Desire Mother Tree and escaped the first wave of dimensional strike. This was not the first time they had experienced such inexplicable, connected, and almost unavoidable attacks. Since a new Pale Emperor appeared on the South Continent, reorganizing the spiritual church and the Baron Empire, the restraint faction of the Rose School began to suppress the hedonist faction's influence in reverse. Finally, they were expelled from the South Continent, fled to the North Continent, continued to develop their faith in the North Continent, and continued to carry out bloody primitive sacrifices, ambushing members of the restraint faction. However, for some unknown reason, every year a large number of hedonist faction beyonders from the Rose School inexplicably died due to various problems, and their beyonder characteristics also disappeared. Regarding this, the leader of the hedonist faction, the god of contempt, Suer-A, also received revelations from the Lord, began to protect important members of the sect, and gained a bit of humanity from it, igniting the seed of revenge. Beside the altar inscribed with incomprehensible characters, the huge god of contempt, Suer-A, whose surface was black and sticky, seemingly flowing with evil liquid from which various unnameable, incomprehensible things grew, was trembling his body. Puff, 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 the followers of the Desire Mother Tree saw this extremely terrifying god of contempt, grabbing the surrounding believers and devouring them into his body. Thus, when heads and faces exactly like the devoured ones grew in the evil liquid flowing on the surface, in a certain examination hall within the Euclidean space, the symbol representing the Desire Mother Tree, followers suddenly simultaneously flowed with disgusting pus bearing a terrifying cursed aura. This was a curse from the source of curses. The Euclidean space did not filter out this part of the observation. Due to the addition of pollutants, the entire examination hall was being rapidly contaminated. And just as this examination hall was about to buckle under the pressure from the invasive symbols of the Desire Mother Tree, Tang extended his hand. He manipulated time and space. As a cryptic servant who was about to finish digesting his potion and the actual controller of this space, he very quickly and leisurely grafted this contaminated symbol to other level 1 examination halls. Let the church's angels handle this kind of thing, it's a bit dirty. As for whether the pressure on the other level 1 examination halls will suddenly increase, isn't that a common occurrence? It's very normal. Otherwise, why would I hold this kind of examination, and why would the 7 orthodox churches still give me face and let their angels and saints come participate? It's not like those angels, those saints, are bored and want to challenge themselves, right? Tang took out the sun scepter from the historical void, waved it casually, then aimed it at the examination hall where the curses first appeared, and with a swish, threw the sun scepter in his hand out. The sun scepter, which began to spit out petroleum during its flight, while emitting black sunlight and screaming, praise the sun, pierced into the core symbol of that examination hall, impaling the target and destroying the mysticism connection brought by the corresponding symbol. Having done all this, Tang clapped his hands and looked towards Nicola on the side. Have you tracked down Suer-A's trace? The Desire Mother Tree created strong interference. The ones who contaminated our core symbol representing desire were just a few of the Desire Mother Tree's followers. They are already dead, likely eaten by Suer-A. People who are digested and turned into curses are difficult to track and locate. This thing is really annoying. Tang nodded helplessly, not feeling disappointed though. He looked at the many examination halls still in progress before him, while many examination halls had already ended and were successively logging into the real world, cleaning up abnormalities and problems in a dimension-reducing manner. Having this level of sweep twice a year can greatly reduce the interference capabilities of those who worship evil gods, such as those who worship the fallen Mother Goddess, Desire Mother Tree, and other outer gods, in the real world. For those who worship local evil gods like the original witch and the true creator, it is also a deterrent and warning. If you go too far, we'll pull you into the Euclidean space and let others gang up on you, and then use error and fooling to synchronously reflect it onto you. It must be said that using the Euclidean space, fooling, and error together yields a completely different experience. Evil god followers who had previously escaped disaster with the protection of their respective deities, their symbols captured by the Euclidean space were destroyed. Even if they temporarily escaped due to the protection from their deities, if they don't quickly improve their strength or forever hide under the protection of their deities, disaster and death will still inevitably befall them with even a slight oversight. Being destroyed has become a destined fate. Whether it's the past, present, or future, this is a predetermined fact. It's just a matter of whether this fact happens now or in the future, unless they keep hiding under the protection of a god, like those chaotic statues of the original witch. Otherwise, they'll be instantly killed as soon as they show their heads. Chapter 298, 297 Aurora Order. Excluding great existences like the Desire Mother Tree and the fallen Mother Goddess who have begun to interfere with the real world within the barrier, many others who took the wrong path, did things they shouldn't have, and lacked strong backgrounds or sufficient strength, were turned into corpses during the Great Purge under powerful dimensional strikes. The investigators wearing Miskatonic University badges, Following the addresses provided by Mr. Flammel, after observing the outcome of the examination through Euclidean space, and with Tang's deception and Nicola's error, logged into the real world and began to intensely influence the Beyonders, sealed artifacts, and items with extraordinary power corresponding to these symbols. They arrived at the same time, checked the gas meters of these Beyonders who had fallen into a baby-like sleep due to the powerful purge, or recovered the corresponding corpses, collected the Beyonder characteristics from the corpses, or sealed the sealed artifacts that had lost control. The Miskatonic University branch campuses established in various countries were brightly lit all night, and the official Beyonders of the churches of the righteous gods in their respective areas who did not participate in the professional ritual magic level tests organized by Miskatonic were also in action. During this period, naturally, some accomplices resisted stubbornly, but they were quickly taken away by the investigators and official Beyonders who came to raid their homes, along with their sealed artifacts and the deities they believed in. Next, the fate of the vast majority of these people will be to be sent to Miskatonic University and become new marionettes hanging from the ceiling of the auditorium. Intis Republic, capital, Trier, in a manor villa in the suburbs. A gentle woman, wearing a black court-style long dress, with a pair of bright yet hiddenly sorrowful gray-black eyes, reflected the figure wearing a black silk top hat who was smiling at her outside the bedroom window. This black witch, responsible for Trier, the capital of Intis, lifted the corner of her nightgown and bowed to the young man in a tailcoat with a gentle expression, then closed the curtains, walked to the bed, and prepared to sleep. By the bed, a white bone statue emitted a faint, shimmering light in the dark environment. Tonight will be a peaceful night. And from today onwards, the fate of high-ranking witches of the witch sect being easily turned into marionettes and hung up should no longer exist. As the witch sect has reached a certain level of cooperation with Miskatonic and the error in Tingen City, as long as they do not do anything too excessive, they will not become targets of the purge and constantly require the original witch's protection to avoid the arrival of death. For them, even the ageless witch can hardly escape the fate of inevitable death that they have woven for us at a certain moment. Black Witch, Clarice let down her coiled black long hair, which accentuated the ageless witch's gentle and involuntarily pitiable appearance. The ageless witch's resurrection methods are completely insufficient in the face of such high-level beings. In front of the archangel in charge of error, if an ageless witch is killed, it can be equivalent to all ageless witches, along with all their resurrection arrangements, being cleared at once. Before this, except for those who were constantly under the gaze of the original and timely hid in a special mirror world during dangerous moments, entering the divine kingdom where the original could provide them with the greatest protection, any of their actions could lead to rapid marionettization or time-worm parasitism. Times have changed. In the current situation where the apocalypse is about to arrive, even the original witch has to slightly restrain her temper. Otherwise, given the current situation, those few clearly do not want significant conflicts to occur between the countries of the North Continent, leading to the balance being broken and causing more things outside of their plans. If the original witch were to act rashly at this time, the greatest possibility would be to suffer another heavy blow. Although she did not know what was going on with the angel who possessed the authority of observation, Black Witch, Clarice understood the original witch's apprehension. As the highest-ranking being of the witch pathway, although the Black Witch was not sure of the original witch's current state, it was clear that after the Pale disaster at the end of the Fourth Epoch, her situation was obviously not good. Everything, perhaps related to the arrangements of the original and that Blood Emperor. But at this critical juncture, the original abandoned the original plan of trading the Conqueror, Beyonder characteristic with the Ruined Kingdom and the Augustus family, and instead cooperated with the Error, who had always had strong hostility towards them. Thinking of this, the Black Witch couldn't help but sigh. But, we are all children of the original. Only by constantly approaching her and being used by her can we avoid death and survive the coming apocalypse. The witch sect is sensible. After confirming their exposure and the presence of an angel skilled in observation, on the other side, it is the most correct thing to reduce the possibility of being targeted. And there are those who are sensible, and naturally, there are those who are not. Among those who believe in the true Creator, there are naturally those who have heard the voice of the Lord, who are insane and irrational, unable to control themselves. And before these people caused irreversible consequences by hearing voices they shouldn't have, they were either hung up and made into marionettes in advance, or they exploded on the spot during the twice-yearly purges, turning into a pile of rotten flesh. Ruined Kingdom, capital, Backland. Under Mr. A's huge hood, a face like that of a woman looked expressionlessly at the kneeling and trembling black-clothed person with a hood, from whom transparent, semi-transparent insects were constantly emerging. Evidently, this was someone who was not very sensible and had done something quite serious. As a secret order that only appeared in the last 200 to 300 years, the Aurora Order has developed quite rapidly. In the past, although their internal members claimed to have created many horror events by listening to the Lord's teachings, these members, even if they luckily escaped the purges by official beyonders and investigators, were quickly cleaned up internally by the Aurora Order themselves. Although they believe in the true Creator, many members do not blindly obey the true Creator's insane ravings. They believe that the Lord is both insane and merciful, and all those who are seduced and corrupted by the Lord's voice are those who failed to withstand the Lord's test and thus became fallen blasphemers. Among them, not only the subordinates of the Aurora Order, but even the divine envoys of the Aurora Order have appeared who betrayed the Lord due to blasphemy, and became shepherds. Regarding these blasphemers, the Aurora Order has never publicly declared that they are not members of the Aurora Order and are traitors. Instead, they have shouldered everything and become the #1 target of attack among the countries of the North Continent who believe in evil gods. The Lord bears everything, so they should also bear everything. Mr. A's tone was calm and unhurried, with a strange sense of weird in the somewhat dark basement. Then why did you disobey the Lord and betray His Eminence, the Pope's command? Lord, it was the Lord who told me, sacrifice, it was the Lord who told me, He wants sacrifice. It was the Lord, Mr. A, it was the Lord told me. The person's body on the ground was constantly, frantically spasming. He gasped for air, clutching at Mr. A's hem, tears and snot flowing, wanting Mr. A to save him. Mr. A, save me. Mr. A, save me, I am a devout believer of the Lord, I heard the Lord's voice, it was the Lord who told me to do this, I heard. From his mouth, nose, eyes, and hair, transparent, semi-transparent insects crawled out, wriggling and standing up, bringing insane, unspeakable mental pollution. Mr. A lowered his eyes. If the person lying on the ground looked up from this angle, he would see Mr. A's cold eyes, devoid of emotion, staring at him without blinking. No, Mr. A spoke slowly, this is not the Lord's voice, nor is it what the Lord wants. You are not devout enough, Blake. You cannot distinguish between your evil thoughts and the voice from the Lord. You merely followed the desires of your heart, following your desires until you reached this point, betraying the Lord and disobeying His Eminence, the Pope's command. You are a blasphemer, and after doing something irreversible, you want the Lord to bear the sins on you. You are a sinner, he said word by word, therefore, you are not worthy of believing in the Lord. No, I heard it, I really heard it, Mr. A, I heard the Lord's voice, Mr. A, no, save me, Mr. A. No, I was wrong, I didn't hear it, all of this is my evil and sin, Mr. A, save me, I can change, I really can change. The person clutched at Mr. A's hem, shouting for help, but a huge force grabbed his neck from behind, pulling him directly backward. Innumerable spiritual threads grew out of this Aurora Order Beyander's body, and transparent, semi-transparent worms drilled in and out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, one by one. The person hanging in midair struggled at first. He kicked his legs wildly, his feet off the ground, pulling at the non-existent threads on his neck. But after a few breaths, his expression changed from pain to calm, and his body swayed in midair, giving up the struggle. He still had breath and a heartbeat, his eyes were clear and filled with the most sincere attachment and faith to the Lord, looking completely different from the madman who was previously frantic and wanted Mr. A to save him. And those transparent, semi-transparent worms had re-entered the body of this devout believer. They drilled under the skin, wriggling madly beneath the surface. The body of this person, suspended by black illusory thin lines, fell down. During this process, his face was also constantly deforming, as if the countless transparent, semi-transparent worms were constantly integrating his muscles and bones, trying to mold a completely new face. When his feet touched the ground again, the face of the believer who had been hung up finally stopped wriggling. Mr. A looked over and saw a face with features completely different from before. Mr. A immediately lowered his head, and after one glance, he stopped looking. His Eminence, the Pope. It is blasphemy to look directly at a god. I don't really care about that. The newly grown face had incredibly soft features, with a naturally alluring quality that was hard to detect. There were also two fleshy buds constantly wriggling on either side of his head, looking as if two new heads were trying to emerge. However, it seemed that due to the limitations of the body itself, the two heads could not fully grow out. The person made of countless worms first looked around, then propped his chin and fixed his gaze on Mr. A in front of him. However, we really need to properly manage those beyonders in the Aurora Order. Secret supplicants and listeners are too easily influenced by that less rational voice of the Lord. If we don't want them to be cleaned up together, teach them how to listen to these things, Mr. A. Yes, as you wish, Mr. A said calmly, with little emotion, his head lowered. As one of the founders of the Aurora Order, His Eminence, the Pope of the Aurora Order, nodded. He and Mr. A's fingers, exposed outside their cloaks, met each other's gaze for a few seconds. Then, without any intention of hiding himself, he took a monocle from the historical void and placed it in his right eye socket. He skillfully pinched his monocle, then looked up. This gaze seemed to penetrate the barrier of the earth, directly seeing the star realm composed of countless abstract concepts, and seeing an abstract red moon. As expected, still so composed. His Eminence, the Pope grinned. Mr. A stood silently behind him, saying nothing. In Euclidean space, Black Vortex Town. After leading the monsters to the hospital, Klein, out of breath, found an empty house with Furs and Anderson to rest temporarily, waiting for their bodies to recover and their spirituality to replenish. As a former office worker, although Klein had trained for nearly a month after transmigrating, his physical fitness simply couldn't keep up with a marathon right from the start. The Diviner Potion provides more enhancement in terms of inspiration. As for physical fitness, I may have to wait until the Clown stage potion to have a significant improvement in physical endurance. Klein rubbed his sore thigh muscles and exchanged some information with Anderson and Furs in this slightly leaky house. I wonder if those two types of monsters will fight. We just blew up all those mushrooms. If they are intelligent enough, will they come directly for us? Furs said with some worry. I don't think so. Anderson made a gesture of planting rice seedlings and smiled. I planted a few mushrooms into the bodies of those long monsters. Chapter 299, 298 Concept Contamination. They stuck mushrooms into the bodies of those Whirlpool people. What kind of operation is this? Klein was full of questions, and from Furs's account, he quickly learned what had happened at the Black Vortex Town Hospital. The placentas of the pregnant women grew into purple river carts all over the mountains and fields. Imagining that scene, Klein couldn't help but shiver, rubbing the goosebumps on his hands, and asked. Those pregnant women in the hospital should be chasing after the placentas that grew out of them. There hasn't been much movement now, so it seems we're safe for now. Klein's earlier commotion was quite large, with half of the first floor of the hospital almost set ablaze by Anderson's flames, including the placenta mushrooms that kept growing from the director's office. Now, if that director hadn't started dissecting, assisting in childbirth, again, those placenta mushrooms should only be on the Whirlpool people. We can't say we're safe, can we, our diviner? Anyway, let's do a divination first. Anderson lifted his eyelids and said somewhat lazily. The saying, do a divination, originated from Rosal the Great of the Intis Republic. Legend has it that in his later years, Rosal the Great detested those who used sorcery, especially those who swindled others under the guise of prophecy and divination, and he compared them to fortune tellers. Therefore, the so-called do a divination is also a somewhat derogatory term, specifically referring to those fake diviners who babble nonsense without any real ability. Nowadays, there are still places within the Intis Republic where a strange custom of diviners and dogs not being allowed entry is circulated. Klein's mouth twitched, but he was already somewhat used to Anderson Hood, this hunter from the Mist Sea who claimed to be Sequence 5 and had a rather annoying mouth. He still quite seriously tossed a coin, performed a simple divination, then took out his pendulum from his pocket, wrapped it around his wrist, and performed a pendulum divination. After confirming with two divinations, Klein, who was sitting back in the slightly leaking room, said to Anderson and Furs, there isn't much danger. The danger tonight should have been concentrated on the things we just experienced. Phew. Furs let out a sigh of relief, her eyelids drooping, looking like a student who had finally finished an exam and could collapse and sleep soundly after forcing herself to stay awake. However, we also need to be careful. Divination is not omnipotent, and there are multiple interpretations of the divination results. Not much danger might just mean there isn't much danger if we respond correctly. But if we don't respond correctly, that danger will clear us all out of the examination room at once. After saying these words, Klein felt something inside him faintly crack and shatter. Klein realized that his diviner potion had been digested. "You're the professional, I'll listen to you." Anderson sensed Klein's slightly surprised and somewhat wistful emotions, but surprisingly, he didn't say much more, just smiled at Klein. "Then I'll take the first half of the night, and you and Miss Wall can take the second half, how about it?" After this round of chasing, everyone's mental strength had dropped significantly, and their condition was indeed not very good. Currently, the one in the best condition was still Anderson Hood, who had the highest sequence. All right, Klein and Furs also had no intention of trying to be strong. Before keeping watch, they each set up altars in the corners. Klein once again prayed to Crimson Lord, Mother of Secrecy, gaining a certain degree of protection from secrecy. Furs prayed to Pale Death, Eternal Slumber, obtaining the ritual effect of suppressing spirituality and concealing vitality. The two rituals were established separately and also overlapped, providing multiple layers of protection. In this strange town, there was only benefit and no harm. As for Anderson, who was only slightly proficient in ritual magic and whose pathway severely limited his abilities, he swayed around the room, dismantling, finding some dry wood, and after igniting the wood with spirituality, lit a fire in this seemingly abandoned, slightly leaking house. The temperature and brightness of the flames seemed to dispel the coldness and dampness in the room. They weren't too worried about attracting monsters after starting a fire, as the ritual magic effects belonging to death and secrecy would completely conceal all the vitality brought by living people. At this moment, the sound of rain outside the window showed no sign of stopping, and instead grew louder, with a feeling of crashing mountains and seas. Klein and Furs, after setting up the rituals and creating a double layer of protection, were already mentally strained from the journey and quickly fell asleep in the corner where it wasn't leaking, recovering their spirituality. Anderson casually picked up a burnt wooden stick from the ground and drew simple sketches on the wood to pass the time. At this time, there was no human sound, only the rustling of rain, the howling wind, and the crackling of burning wood in the corner of the house. Klein quickly fell into a dream. However, unknowingly, Klein's somewhat muddled spiritual body seemed to detach from his physical body, following a strange attraction, as if to pass through layers of the real world and the spirit world, drifting towards a certain area above the spirit world. There was an expanse of gray fog, with a magnificent palace standing within the gray fog. His connection with Source Castle has strengthened. It should be due to the completion of the potion's digestion. In his muddled state, Klein seemed to hear a familiar voice, which seemed to penetrate through layers of barriers and enter his ears. Who is it? So familiar. Celestial Worthy is really restless. Can't he just go and truly die first? Anyway, as long as the Lord of the Mysteries is born, he will definitely win after tens of thousands of years. Can't he have some letting go spirit and not cause trouble all day? Will he only behave when he's caught by God and the fallen Mother Goddess? Is this what they mean by only behaving when hung on the wall? Klein instinctively frowned. His brain, which had turned into a mush, couldn't process the words and phrases appearing in this long sentence. He should have seen the ripples of fate, and because of this, he had to do and attempt some things to obstruct us. Tang, after all, he is the master of Source Castle. We can currently control it, but we still can't truly replace him. A voice that Klein remembered very clearly came from an even more ethereal place. Tang. Klein's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. And that voice mentioning Tang, he seemed to have heard it not long ago. Klein struggled to wake up, but his spiritual body flew higher and higher, seemingly about to touch the gray fog, and in an unconscious state, ascend to gray mist. If you can't beat them, you can't beat them. Cryptic Servant, Time Worm Potion, the mental remnants of Fu Sheng Zan Huang Tian Zun in the error uniqueness and the fool uniqueness have been counteracted by me and are almost ground away. It's understandable to be anxious. After all, Celestial Worthy definitely doesn't want to see a fool who advanced under these circumstances. Another string of strange nouns, but Klein's intuition told him that the meanings represented by these nouns seemed very important to him. Klein subconsciously wanted to remember the words in those sentences. In his unconscious state, his spiritual body rapidly approached gray mist. But just as Klein's spiritual body was about to pass through the gray fog and reach the magnificent palace on gray mist, and wake up, someone grabbed his hand. Tang looked at Klein's spiritual body, which was influenced by a bit of Celestial Worthy's mental will due to the convergence of Beander characteristics and the completion of the diviner potion's digestion, and which had the aura of the grey fog. He raised his eyebrows slightly, not particularly surprised by this scene. Celestial Worthy's takeout has arrived, huh? Tang took out a translucent, fool, mask from the system space, which had half a twisted line and half an eye without a pupil. Klein, have a good dream. Sorry, Celestial Worthy, you probably won't be able to eat this takeout. Klein looked at Tang, who was wearing the fool mask, in a daze. Just as the word you came out of his mouth, his spiritual body plummeted violently. His body, mind, and spirit were instantly grafted together, becoming seamlessly connected, and would no longer easily detach from his body in dreams to wander in the spirit world. At the same time, Tang deceived a very small portion of Celestial Worthy's remaining known information and processed the things Klein heard and the scenes he saw accordingly, ensuring that the other party wouldn't directly suffer mental breakdown, lose control, and die by hearing voices they shouldn't hear or knowing things they shouldn't know due to their low level or the lack of anchors. Mr. Error, sitting in the magnificent palace on grey mist, simultaneously deceived the rules, causing the concept of fool Klein to temporarily become Error himself, thereby deceiving Celestial Worthy. Mr. Error was quite skilled at deceiving Celestial Worthy. The night passed without incident. Apart from what seemed like whirlpool people crawling outside while Anderson was keeping watch, and strange shuffling sounds outside the door while Furs and Klein were keeping watch, nothing else happened. When he woke up in the second half of the night, Klein only felt as if he had had a strange dream. He felt it was very important, but he subconsciously ignored the fact that as a diviner, there was no such thing as having dreamed something but being unable to remember it, nor did he use methods like dream divination to recall it. Klein quite easily overlooked the relevant issues. And of course, Furs, Anderson, and the others were even less likely to know what had happened last night. The next day, after the few of them had recovered their spirituality and stabilized their mental strength above 90, they packed up and prepared to leave the abandoned house. In the second half of last night, Klein had roughly translated the contents of the tattered notebook found in the church, but there wasn't actually much useful information in it. The most important point is that we know this town wasn't originally built for humans to live in. This should be the town of the stars that the priest believed in. The people living here are children of the stars and the sea. But I feel that the people here, when we saw them yesterday, were almost no different from humans. They don't look like monsters, nor do they look like children of the stars and the sea. Furs thought for a moment and expressed her confusion. Klein calmly said, according to this priest's work log, the people in this town have been almost normal humans for 60 years, but there is a key point here. Look, every 60 years, the whirlpool will appear, and at that time, the children of the stars and the children of the sea lost here will also awaken and return to the embrace of the Lord. He scanned Furs and Anderson and slowly said, I suspect that the people in this town who usually seem relatively normal will become more and more like monsters at this point, or rather, the closer it gets to this point. And no matter whether the people in this town at that time are children of the stars and the sea or not, even objects without spirituality will become part of the monster. It certainly seems that way. Anderson looked thoughtful and turned to Klein. Did you figure this out from the words on the station sign when we first arrived? That is part of the reason. Klein nodded, not hiding anything, and said sincerely, in a town where even the words are distorted, I don't think those ancient Hermes are the so-called children of the stars and the great sea. Besides, look, he pointed to the sky not far away. Today's sky was even gloomier than yesterday, with lowered clouds, stronger winds, and heavier rain. It seemed as if these things wanted to completely submerge the entire black vortex town, but above the sky not far away, a gigantic whirlpool had already formed. It hung inverted in the sky, stirring the surrounding clouds, wind, and rain, sucking them continuously into the massive whirlpool. I also don't think that kind of thing is children of the stars and the great sea. In other words, this is a large-scale contamination-type examination room. Moreover, this contamination not only includes mental contamination, turning people into monsters, but the things causing these events are also constantly infecting all surrounding concepts, from words to weather, from locals to outsiders, all without exception will be contaminated. This situation where both humans and non-humans are constantly being influenced by the concept of whirlpool is clearly not normal, and it's not an examination room that can be easily passed just by fighting monsters and finding items. Anderson obviously thought of this and couldn't help but sigh again. How unlucky. Why, of all things, did he randomly get something like this? Tang, who had quietly cheated, silently withdrew the finger that was amplifying the probability of a certain event, turning it into fate. System. Ah, well. Nicola adjusted his black silk top hat. How to put it, this matter should have nothing to do with him. In short, the final interpretation right belongs to Miskatonic University. If I say you're random, you're random. How can a machine cheat, right? Chapter 300. Mr. B. The clouds were getting lower, a heavy black mass that let almost no light through. On the street, there weren't many pedestrians at this hour, presenting a picture of absolute silence, just like last night. The ordinary NPCs hadn't woken up yet. Klein tossed a coin, and a gust of wind almost prevented him from catching the gold pound. After narrowly catching the coin, Klein secretly let out a sigh of relief, then glanced at the divination result. It seems the danger during the day will be much less than at night. After the diviner potion was fully digested, Klein's divination skill and spiritual intuition were among the top ranks within the lower sequences. Not necessarily. Anderson rotated his wrist, looked at the buildings in the distance, and said based on past experience and lessons, after all, I don't think the designer would be so kind as to give us such a transitional safe period. Yesterday's daytime was already considered time for them to react, rest, and gather information. If there was no danger during the day today, then the design of this examination venue would be a failure. Klein thought about it and agreed. He asked Furs, Miss Wall, how many tasks do you have left? Klein himself recorded 2, Uncle's funeral, and coffin at home. He still needed 3 more to reach the minimum requirement to pass the exam. Of course, even if the minimum requirement is met, it depends on whether both the examiner's average score and final score pass. Furs replied, 2, one is the neighbor's funeral, and the other is the pregnant woman in the hospital. Anderson, on the other hand, recorded 3. After following Furs to the hospital yesterday, he saw the things chasing Klein and quickly used his camera to record the anomalies. But as a Sequence 5 Reaper, he needed to record at least 12 special photos. At the very least, after Klein and Furs complete their respective tasks, this Sequence 5 Reaper will still need to stay for a long time. And in a place like this, the longer one stays, the more dangerous it becomes. Then our next location will be the school, how about that? Anderson and Furs discussed with Klein, and the few of them quickly reached an agreement to go check out the school in Black Vortex Town. Our hair has grown longer again. Furs involuntarily cast her gaze upon Klein and Anderson's hair, muttering a sentence. So we need to hurry up, otherwise, I suspect our own hair will directly strangle us due to the strange mutations in this town. Anderson chimed in. Klein also looked at his hair, which he normally couldn't see, but could already see after just one night, and nodded silently. If it continues to grow at this rate, by the 4th day, Klein will have beautiful waist-length hair. They didn't try to cut their hair, but their spiritual intuition told them that if they cut it off at this time, something quite bad might happen. For example, the cut hair turning into monsters, or the hair growing back vengefully after being cut. This should be a restriction inherent to this examination venue. The organizers won't let us stay here indefinitely to complete the test. If they still haven't finished by a fixed deadline, their hair might really strangle them, just as Anderson said, forcibly clearing them from the examination venue. Okay, let's speed up. However, Furs suddenly thought of something, and her expression turned a little strange. If this place could be open to the public, I actually think it wouldn't be bad. As a great writer, Miss Furs Wall had clearly seen many colleagues with slightly bald heads from staying up late to meet deadlines. She murmured to herself, that would definitely be very profitable. Klein. It seemed to make some sense. He remembered his captain. It seemed, well, one time when he entered the captain's office, he saw the captain using ritual magic to grow hair. Anderson touched his golden hair and said nothing. When passing by the town hospital, Klein and the others saw that the place Anderson had blown up with fire yesterday was already repaired at some point. The large hole blasted into the wall by the explosion had disappeared, and the floor belonging to the obstetrics and gynecology department looked ordinary, with no abnormalities. At the hospital entrance, the people coming and going were still ordinary doctors, nurses, and patients, as if the whirlpool people from yesterday, the spreading placenta mushrooms, and the pregnant women eating mushrooms had never appeared. Klein glanced at it, then casually looked away, as if he had never blown up that place last night. As the sky gradually brightened, although the low clouds were still a heavy black mass, the wind speed and rainfall gradually stabilized. Is it going to clear up? Furs looked up at the sky, frowning. Most likely not. Klein also looked at the sky. Anderson's idea was the same as Klein's. Rather than clearing up, it's more like something incredible is coming and giving us a moment to breathe before it arrives. The wind howls before the storm. Let's go, hurry up and make progress. Okay. Black Vortex Town, underground. In the center of the vast, empty underground mine, a small black sphere floated in midair, so dark that even light could not escape it, swallowed by that profound darkness. At this moment, the sphere was pulsating in midair with a regular rhythm. This pulsation was accompanied by the rhythmic pulsation of the surrounding air. The small sphere was like a heart pumping nutrients and blood outwards. The entire vast underground mine trembled together, as if this place was a person's chest cavity, and the things on the surface were its organs, blood vessels, brain, skin, and flesh. The most core location of the entire town was this underground mine, which symbolized the whirlpool. And at this moment, within this vast underground cave that no one had set foot in, a pitch-black shadow appeared at some point. The shadow quickly detached from the main shadow, and a hooded figure holding a candle emerged, wriggling into existence. He was Mr. B of the Aurora Order. Black Vortex Town, Level 3, Professional Ritual Magic Level Test, Second Round Examination Venue, Registered Candidates, 4. Besides Klein and Furs, these two Sequence 9s, there was another Sequence 5 of the same sequence as Anderson, who had quietly infiltrated here and entered the core area of this town much earlier than them. And by solving the problem here, candidates could directly obtain a Level 1 Ritual Master Certificate. After all, the anomalies here were definitely not problems that could be solved by low to mid-sequence beyonders and most saints. Mr. B raised his head and looked at the small black sphere, which resembled a pulsating heart. The corner of his mouth curved slightly, and then he began to cough violently. Cough cough, cough cough. As he coughed, Mr. B collapsed onto the ground and spat out a small piece of pinkish flesh from his mouth. That piece of flesh wriggled as if trying to form a new human shape, but it seemed to lack sufficient nutritional supply. In the end, it only twisted like tentacle-like blood vessels and nerves, and was then exceptionally devoutly bitten into by Mr. B, who was prostrated on the ground, chewed, and swallowed. After doing all this, Mr. B slowly stood up again. A faint smile appeared on his beautiful face under the hood. He slowly walked towards the central area of the mine, which served as the core of the Black Vortex Town examination venue. As he walked, Mr. B's hair continuously grew longer bit by bit, getting longer and longer. The ends coiled, beginning to wrap around Mr. B, on his body, and on his head, forming bundles and bundles of incredible things resembling whirlpools. The countless whirlpools made of hair seemed to possess an unparalleled attraction to the surrounding things, like black holes. Silently, all things would be attracted by them. This was not only a physical attraction but also a spiritual attraction. But Mr. B didn't seem to feel this terrible attraction wildly emanating from his continuously growing hair, because the thing in front of him was the core element causing the anomaly in the entire Black Vortex Town, and the culprit that caused Mr. B to become like this. Good afternoon, Lord Eggs. Mr. B spoke towards the small black sphere in front of him in a slightly hoarse, low voice. Silently, the sphere's attraction to the surroundings suddenly decreased. As if it had absorbed enough, one after another illusory black fine lines appeared from the edge of the sphere. These black fine lines tore the sphere apart. In the vast underground cave, the sphere, pulled by the fine lines, suddenly expanded, grew, and tore through space-time. Immediately after, a vast, boundless black world, as if containing countless stars, suddenly appeared before Mr. B. That was the boundless universe, that was a vast and boundless starry sky. This was a stargate, the gate of extremes, crossing time and space, connecting the inside and outside of the barrier. Also at this moment, Tang, wearing a loose off-white top paired with trousers of the same color, poked his head in from outside the expanding door. Seeing it was Mr. B, this image originating from the historical void adjusted the monocle in his right eye socket. Main body, someone is looking for you. After speaking, Tang's movement paused slightly, and only then did he turn his gaze towards the last candidate in this examination venue. Tang in Euclidean space cast his gaze this way. Mr. B of the Aurora Order, a Sequence 5 shepherd, the listener chosen by the true creator. You should go find Nicola, not me. Tang tapped his monocle, walked from outside the door to inside, and then the torn space-time behind him instantly collapsed, returning to its initial state of stably transmitting pollution outwards. This door was a projection of the high-dimensional world onto the real world based on Euclidean space. Its basic function was the same. It was easy for those outer deities and their dependents to find it and use it as an infiltration coordinate to invade the real world. It also needed to be guarded normally and could not be kept open at all times. After seeing this Angel King, Mr. B bowed slightly, then said in a hoarse voice, "But the Lord told me that this matter can only be decided by you." Was this the true creator coming to consult with him? What kind of consultation could this major evil god, who rapped all day to harass Aurora Order members, have with him? Give him Ouroboros as a marionette. Tang knew something was wrong when he saw Mr. B appear in Miskatonic. Among the many secret orders, especially those created in the Fifth Epoch, after Tang was promoted to Ancient Scholar and rapidly ascended to Miracle Worker and Cryptic Servant, such as the Aurora Order, Iron Cross Society, Psychology Alchemists, etc., either the leader was his marionette, or there were important members who were his marionettes. And at the level of this group of small fries, the possibility of these secret orders discovering that their important members have been compromised, or even that their own organizers are marionettes, is minimal. Making the fake indistinguishable from the real has always been something the sequence of the Lord of the Mysteries lineage is good at. The Aurora Order was also in such a state. It was actually put together by a marionette controlled by Tang, in cooperation with a certain paranoid Angel King who didn't want to reveal his name, to give the true creator something to do so he wouldn't constantly think about harassing Beyonders from other pathways, providing a legitimate outlet. So now, members of this secret order, which should have been controlled by Tang and a certain paranoid individual who didn't want to reveal his name, actually came to participate in the Miskatonic exam without a word. If it was a coincidence, he would swallow the true creator alive. So, what is it that requires me to make a decision? Tang looked at Mr. B and smiled slightly, but before you say anything, let me guess. I've given your lord several, fate. He should be a bit more sober now, right? And then, you chose to find me here instead of outside. You are hiding from the angel of fantasy. The smile on his lips grew wider and wider as he spoke the name, Adam, right? There was a moment of dead silence in the air. Mr. B's gaze froze. He quickly looked up, but was completely obscured by his hair, which had grown to cover the sky. However, Mr. B only felt that after the Angel King opposite him uttered that name, the surrounding air began to rapidly turn cold and freeze. It was as if a calm and unruffled gaze was piercing through layer after layer of curtains, falling upon Mr. B and seeing through all the true thoughts in his heart. However, before Mr. B could speak, Tang waved his hand. All right, no need to worry. He can't see, hear, or know anything here. Your choice was right. Even if you call his name here, he won't look over. Otherwise, there might be one less angel of fantasy in this world and one more, writer, marionette contaminated by fate. After all, his big boss, honored treasure, should be very happy to see something like causing trouble for the original god. In the spirit world, in the mysterious space above the gray fog, Mr. Error held an ordinary, plain quill pen, twirled it, and placed it on the long bronze table. Sitting at the very end of the long bronze table, Mr. Fool blinked his eyes and gleefully pinched the crystal-carved monocle in his right eye socket. Well, for a cryptic servant, scaring people is quite normal, isn't it? Chapter 301, 300 The True Creator. Tang looked at Mr. B, who was watching him, with a smile. After all, whether it's contacting your Pope, in the real world, or in Tingan City under the gaze of Error, it's very likely to be seen, heard, and noticed by Adam. After the ancient sun god fell, the insane humanity was born from his body. Before the three angel kings, Wind Angel, Wisdom Angel, and White Angel, he took away the uniqueness of the Hanged Man pathway and the sequence 1 Beander characteristic. His divine part, however, revived in one of his two children, Adam, who was born with the uniqueness of the visionary pathway. From a certain perspective, the true creator and Adam are one. They were born from the same place and will eventually merge again. But before this final outcome arrives, before the ancient sun god resurrects, it is still unknown whether humanity, or divinity, will hold the dominant position. Adam at St. Peter's Hospital's psychiatric department in Tingan City is one of the reasons the true creator is wary. It is clear that Adam has already cooperated with the Error, in Tingen City in the half-fool, and the true creator obviously doesn't know what deal Tang made with Adam. Therefore, it is clearly problematic and abnormal for an angel of the Aurora Order to appear rashly in Tingen City, and Adam is highly likely to cast his gaze directly. From the perspective of fallen confidence, which stems from knowing too much and from the despairing, insane humanity, the true creator will inevitably harbor the most insane thoughts when speculating on the content of the deal between them, the two angel kings. This would naturally include things like, slaughter me and give me to Adam as a supreme tonic to spice things up, or something similar. Of course, it's not actually that bloody. However, judging by the current situation, Tang is indeed more willing to see Adam lead the ancient sun god's awakening. Adam's state is clearly better, and unlike the true creator, although Adam is already suspected by the Black Knight goddess as one of the ancient sun god's hidden moves, the other true gods have not yet suspected this point, and their attitude towards Adam is much better than towards Amon. This means that Adam may not be struck by lightning, but Amon will definitely be struck by lightning if he comes out. Furthermore, compared to the obvious living target, which is the true creator who is certainly related to the ancient sun god, Adam, who is quietly making a fortune, is clearly more suitable to lead the ancient sun god's resurrection. He is still on the North Continent, and compared to the true creator who has been locked up in a small dark room, he has more room for operation. Moreover, and most importantly, the hanged man is really unstable and might start rapping at any moment, which is too noisy. However, if it's just to hang me up and make me a marionette, then I don't really care who leads and who assists. It's just that neither Adam nor the true creator would probably be willing. Tang looked at Mr. B with a smile. So, what does your lord think? Help the lord return to the North Continent, Mr. B's slightly hoarse voice echoed in the empty underground cave. You should have this ability. Indeed, Tang said, touching his chin thoughtfully upon hearing Mr. B's request. As an angel king, using grafted authority, combined with the essentially special Euclidean space in the Source Castle, which is already half his home, he could indeed bypass the 7 god seals and smuggle the true creator out. But, I refuse. The smile on Tang's face didn't change at all. He looked at Mr. B in front of him. This has no value. The true creator coming out brings me no benefit at all, and instead will increase my burden. The North Continent is already chaotic enough. What is he thinking? How could I let him out? As a large-sized evil god, can't he stop thinking about descending all day long and do something beneficial for the people? Moreover, by not hanging up Ouroboros, who occasionally comes out to take advantage, Tang felt that he had already shown enough respect to a true god. Host, you really have a strong sense of possession over other people's beyonders. The system complained. You're so bad, host. But I really want a Mercury Serpent marionette. This can supplement my authority in fate, the domain of destiny, symbolizing the disorder and inevitable arrival of fate, strengthening their symbolic meaning and making them more complete. He just wants everyone in the world to become his marionettes. What did he do wrong? Speaking of this, Tang felt a little regretful. To be honest, I saw Ouroboros several times, but I held back. Don't you think I've already given the true creator face? And now he's asking me to release the true creator. What is that guy thinking? System. That seems to make some sense. System suggestion. But this system thinks that one should still respect a true god. Since Ouroboros can't be touched, host, should this system find you another Mercury Serpent? In the Euclidean space, Tang, as the main body, Nicola covered his face and sighed. Are you being polite, system? What's with your attitude? Solving problems for its host. The code is written like this, is it wrong? Although, the other Mercury Serpent, it seems, probably, should be their ally, but whether it's alive or semi-alive, or just a marionette, there shouldn't be much difference. Tang, if you say it's wrong, it doesn't seem wrong, but if you say it's not wrong. Backland, a certain speaker who arrived here following the guidance of destiny looked up at the sky. Why do I suddenly have a bad feeling? Is it an illusion? Black Vortex Town, underground. Then, if the Lord is willing. Mr. B spoke slowly, his voice becoming somewhat strained. Tang came back to his senses, glanced at Mr. B, and then, as if he had seen something interesting, narrowed his eyes slightly, the curve of his lips also rising. The Lord is willing to give you 2 Dark Angel Beander characteristics after the transaction is completed. Dark Angel, the name of the sequence 1 potion of the Hanged Man pathway. 2 Dark Angel Beander characteristics. Tang seemed a little tempted, but he quickly smiled and shook his head again. This is like a blank check. Not to mention whether your lord can separate his Beander characteristics without dropping his rank, even if he can, that will be after he merges with Adam, won't it? Am I right, true creator, or should I call you, Grisha? Mr. B raised his head. On his beautiful face, shrouded by the hood, cracks had appeared one after another at some point. The cracks were not from the outside in, but seemed to grow from the inside out. Something was sucking on Mr. B's flesh and blood, and that was the flesh and blood sleeping in Mr. B's stomach, a reaction caused by the gradual consumption of this shepherd. Through some unknown method, this angel of the Aurora Order obtained a piece of the true creator's flesh and blood, hid it in his stomach, brought it into the examination room, and met with Tang. The true creator is the pinnacle of the Hanged Man pathway. In addition to mastering authorities like darkness and degradation, he is also the most powerful expert in flesh and blood magic of this pathway. When Tang spoke that name, in the empty underground mine, the candle in Mr. B's hand suddenly went out. This name, spoken by Tang without much concealment, and even deliberately using ancient Hermes, caused a strange anomaly. After Tang finished speaking that name, faintly, in this underground cave that should have been completely controlled and restricted by the Euclidean space, something seemed to have infiltrated the shadows. All things showed signs of degradation, and even Tang's shadow began to ooze viscous, black liquid. That black, viscous liquid was like the fallen confidence of all living beings. Tang casually glanced at his shadow, then pulled it to the side. A new historical void image belonging to him quickly walked out of the historical mist and stood beside Tang. The original historical void image was swallowed by the shadow under its feet after doing all this. However, at the moment of degradation, this historical void image was controlled by the newly appeared Tang and hung up. It struggled for a moment in midair and became a marionette of the new historical void image, then returned to the historical void and disappeared. Tang's new historical void image propped his chin with one hand, and with his free hand, snapped his fingers in midair. I wish for the darkness here to recede and for no more signs of degradation to appear. The miracle worker fulfilled his miracle. Because what came was only a small piece of the true creator's flesh and blood, his miracle was easily realized and did not become distorted. And the small black sphere behind Tang, symbolizing the Stargate and the Ultimate Gate, still stood firmly in its original position, without any change due to the true creator's degradation and Tang's wish. Don't be so agitated. Mr. B's body was also contaminated by darkness and degradation. His beautiful face was already stained with a seemingly permanent shadow, obscuring his features. Not only that, as the flesh and blood in Mr. B's stomach rapidly revived, Mr. B's body also began to be affected. After all, even a sequence 5 Beander of the same pathway could hardly bear this level of power. Looking at Mr. B, who had already started to fester and was beginning to self-disintegrate and be assimilated because he couldn't bear the descent of a part of the true creator's power, Tang lifted his eyelids and asked faintly, "Why are you so surprised?" Mr. B's voice became even more hoarse. "How did you know that name? He should have never mentioned this name. Amnesiac and the others shouldn't know it. As an angel with the authority of observation, of course, I currently cannot directly observe gods, because the mental impact brought by observing gods is also a burden for me." Tang snapped his fingers again. Behind him in the already swollen, Mr. B, whose body was being assimilated, a high-backed chair appeared for each of them. He sat down leisurely. "Please have a seat." Mr. B did not refuse. His body, already swollen and likely to burst at any moment, sat down on that high-backed chair. "How should I put this? I made a deal with Adam, which you should already know. He didn't tell me the name, but it is indeed related to the content of the deal. I think you are also aware that the Lord of the Mysteries, as the King of Space-Time, the Beacon of Destiny, and the Master of the Spirit World, after the Fool, Error, and Door pathways reach the above the sequence level and become the Lord of the Mysteries, can control the historical void, which is the historical mist attached to the spirit world and the source castle." Tang propped his chin with both hands, looking at the tumor in front of him that had swollen to the point of almost completely swallowing the high-backed chair beneath him, and Mr. B, whose flesh and blood had been mostly consumed, said, "Although the spirit world was destroyed once when the original creator revived, the symbols and many things from the old era have completely lost their traces of existence in the spirit world. Even the current spirit world 7 lights only appeared after the original creator split again and the spirit world was reborn. But the historical mist attached to the spirit world and the source castle still faithfully recorded all of this. This is also why Klein, after advancing to Ancient Scholar, could directly run rampant in the historical mist, running all the way back to before the First Epoch to a safe point that was almost unnoticed, without worrying about being caught by Zarathus, who was already a Sequence 1 cryptic servant at the time, or Grim Wolf Cathar, who was a Sequence 2 miracle worker. An Ancient Scholar masters history. The less history is mastered by others, the safer that period of history is. Things that happened in the past still exist and will not disappear just because the spirit world was destroyed. Of course, if other transmigrators advance to Ancient Scholar and realize that this planet is Earth, they can also reach the abandoned cities of the old epoch and see what is faithfully recorded in the historical mist. And as an angel and cryptic servant in the domain of observation, by utilizing the historical mist, Tang slightly investigated the historical parts of the old epoch that did not involve the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings and peace, and the original God, and did not involve the original creator. Then, while investigating, he slightly saw something else. That's not too much, is it? Tang smiled lightly at Mr. B, whose original face was no longer visible. The specific content of the deal between me and Adam is inconvenient to say much about, but I think you want to get out of the East Continent before Adam comes looking for you, so you can find Adam first. Taking advantage of the window when Adam is still an angel king and has not yet become a visionary, prioritize devouring the other party to lead the ancient sun god's resurrection with humanity. Although they are both parts of the ancient sun god's will, this kind of struggle over who leads is perfectly normal between Adam and the true creator. Mr. B's mouth had been completely swallowed by the expanding flesh, but Tang still heard his, or rather, the true creator's voice, yes. Chapter 302, 301 How to Escape. Only thieves can be on the offensive for 1,000 days, there's no logic in defending against a thief for 1,000 days. Adam is plotting for the position of visionary in adjacent sequences. The true creator, belonging to the mad humanity side of the ancient sun god, is dominating the ancient sun god's resurrection with his divinity, but he is currently only an angel king and has not reached the level of a true god. Meanwhile, his brother, Aemon, has fallen to the Sequence 2 level and currently dares not appear in the North and South continent in his true body, naturally unable to provide much effective assistance. After all, if Amon's true body appeared, he would be hung up and immediately made into a marionette. In battles between sequences, Adam cannot directly enter the fray and completely fall out with Tang and Nicola, these two angel kings. And the true creator is naturally aware of Adam's plot. As the Hanged Man, who was already a Sequence 0, his humanity, which is more complete and mad than Adam's, and the divinity possessed by the Hanged Man, will also cause him to instinctively want to approach Adam, devour him, and become a true god of both the visionary and Hanged Man pathways. Between these two, Adam's advantage is that he can still move around, is not too restricted by the seven gods, has the second blasphemy slate, has Amon's help, and has the Twilight Hermit order guiding the world's trends. However, his disadvantage is also obvious. He is only an angel king and not yet the visionary. The tide of the era has not yet reached the node Adam has preset. The true creator, on the other hand, is a Sequence 0 true god, with the help of Ouroboros, the serpent of Mercury. Even though he is sealed by the seven gods and confined within the East continent, he can still interfere with the North continent through some means. Furthermore, he is closer to the first blasphemy slate and it is easier for him to obtain that blasphemy slate which can mobilize the power of the Chaos Sea. His disadvantage is that he is trapped in the East continent, unable to move freely, and cannot face the not yet divine Adam at the level of a complete Sequence 0 true god. Next is a race against time. Will Adam become the visionary first, or will the true creator step out of the forsaken land of the gods first and confront Adam? Devouring and being devoured, dominator and dominated, this is the struggle between Adam and the true creator. However, in terms of outcome, the ancient sun god will ultimately return. And in this level of struggle, the forces or angels that can participate are naturally few and far between. To avoid exposing Adam's characteristic as the divine side of the ancient sun god, the support of almost all Sequence 0 true gods is meaningless to this struggle. The smile on Tang's face became increasingly sincere, and tiny brilliant light spots rapidly streaked across his dark eyes, which were like the bottom of a vast ocean. Then, it depends on Mr. Grisha, what sincerity you have. Picking up the shepherd Beander characteristic that had fallen to the ground, Tang dusted off the bloody parts sticking to it, glanced at the exploded flesh and blood on the ground that had been completely polluted by some of the true creator's power, and after placing this Beander characteristic into the system space, he lifted the maintenance of his historical void projection. Mr. B was deliberately let in. In the Euclidean space, Nicola looked at Tang. As an angel with the authority over the observation domain, Tang had known that the true creator's flesh and blood were hidden in Mr. B's stomach the moment Mr. B stepped into Tingen City. Ah, yes, that's how we can negotiate conditions. Tang sat somewhat lazily on a rocking chair that had appeared behind him at some point, swaying back and forth. He tilted his head, relaxed his body, and his whole person seemed to have melted onto the rocking chair like a pancake, his eyelids drooping, as if he could fall asleep at any moment. However, in this state, Tang's voice remained calm. Although we are cooperating with Adam, this doesn't mean we can't cooperate with the true creator, does it? When the snipe and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Nicola naturally understood this principle. Since both sides want to compete, it's not too much for him, the third party, to raise prices, right? Without affecting the ancient sun god's resurrection, we might as well fleece these two for whatever we can. It's not a loss. Adam knowing about it doesn't matter. To him, who lacks humanity, as long as what we do doesn't harm the entire world, he won't do anything to us. Otherwise, who would he trick among the unlucky demigods and angels in the Twilight Hermit Order to come and offer their heads? Nicola nodded, noncommittal. He adjusted his black silk top hat and looked once more at the countless light clusters before him, monitoring the condition of the candidates. If anything went wrong, he would throw them out. Now that the examination process was halfway through, nearly half of the light clusters had sunk to the bottom of the Euclidean space, making contact with reality and landing in the real world. The remaining examination areas were either complex in their inherent rules, such as rule-based areas like rule oddities, or were areas with a large time span that required a certain amount of time to run, or were level 1-inch areas where angels and saints were located, which were dangerous, chaotic, and difficult to resolve in a short amount of time. Within a nearly uninhabited planet was a thick atmosphere where the sun and moon could not be seen. This was a colony, but the people in the colony had mysteriously disappeared. This was a planet almost the size of Earth. Planet 426, Parasite. In this examination area, there existed a type of monster. They initially appeared in the form of eggs, contained within a crashed alien horseshoe-shaped spacecraft. Under specific circumstances, the creatures inside these eggs would hatch, implanting the eggs, or embryos, of their species into biological bodies. As time passed, the embryos absorbed the host's genetic chain and flesh, gradually growing, eventually bursting out of the chest, rapidly maturing, building nests, and laying more eggs to raise more monsters. The colonists discovered the spacecraft that had crashed for unknown reasons, found the eggs inside, and subsequently, the colonists were parasitized. The monsters themselves, created based on the sci-fi horror film Alien, exhibited characteristics in the level 1-inch areas such as resistance to curses, resistance to cold and heat, extreme adaptability to the environment, being almost immune to damage from low to mid-sequence Beander abilities, and immunity to the impact caused by mythical creature forms. They were inherently extremely aggressive, skilled in team combat, and after parasitizing Beanders and absorbing their flesh and blood, although candidates would be directly thrown out of the examination area when their health dropped to the limit, the incubation process of these monsters would not cease. The aliens, born from the bodies of Beanders, would inherit some of the host's Beander abilities and spirituality. If the parasitized individual was at the demigod level, then the alien bursting out of that Beander's body would also possess certain divine power. This was a miraculous creation, and in the Planet 426, Parasite, examination area, there happened to be a witch skilled in curses. She was the ageless witch, Katrina, a Sequence 3 Witch of White. At this moment, Katrina was standing inside a glass window mirror. Her expression was somewhat solemn as she looked at the monsters that were everywhere in the entire human base and were also hunting other saints and angels. Among these monsters, one was incredibly large, terrifying, and mad. It originated from a parasitized angel. For a parasitized individual, without the correct solution, even if they cut open their chest and removed the alien embryo inside, it would reappear in the healed chest cavity when the wound closed. They were bound together by some twisted force. Either the alien burst out of the chest, or they found the correct method to resolve the alien embryo and survive. However, unfortunately, before that angel could find a solution, the alien burst out of his chest. A Sequence 2 angel, a subordinate deity walking on the ground, was killed in front of them by a monster bursting out of his chest. Ignoring most witch curses and flames, they were almost immune to illness, possessed a certain degree of divinity, and the mythical creature form of the Gorgon Katrina could not be maintained for too long. Therefore, the probability of activating the mythical creature form, petrifying such a large number of monsters in one go, and clearing the stage directly was not high. As long as one was not petrified, Katrina would lose. And the monster born from the angel's body was even more unsolvable and terrifying. Charm. For this type of monster, charm ability at only the saint level would only make them more interested in using her as a host and target for parasitism. Katrina looked at the white bone statue beside her and murmured softly. But why hasn't the original looked over? She looked through the mirror at the dark, lightless sky outside, her eyes reflecting no image of any mirror. She could not establish contact with the mirrors she had previously marked, nor could she establish any mysticism connection with any mirror outside of this place. There was a spirit world here, there was a world in the mirror, but this level of isolation. Where is this place? Examination areas continuously ended, and the light clusters representing the examination areas sank, connecting with reality and beginning to intensely influence certain people or events in reality. The entire North Continent had a vibrant appearance. These few days were destined to be sleepless nights. Black Vortex Town. The abnormalities in the school were even more terrifying than Klein and the others had imagined. Those things. Furs was a relatively experienced Beander. She had seen many vengeful spirits, undead, and monsters, but those ghostly things in the school. Furs thought about it. Oh no, just thinking about it made her get goosebumps. There were many normal students in the school, but at the same time, there were also some abnormal students. Their speed of movement was significantly slower than that of ordinary people, and their backs were bulging, as if something was growing on them. Anderson lifted a student's clothes, and the three of them saw that the student's back had grown circles upon circles of symbols that looked like whirlpools. Their backs were deformed, and the bones and flesh inside seemed to be pulled by something, wanting to grow something out of their backs. When Furs saw those things, she couldn't help but guess, they aren't going to grow a snail shell on their backs, are they? With such a slow appearance, coupled with the concept of whirlpool, it was hard not to associate them with creatures like snails in nature. And the result was obvious. Furs Wall, this great writer, had excellent associative ability. In the men's restroom stall, Anderson found two giant snail humans whose bodies had completely degenerated and whose eyeballs protruded outwards. Unlike the distorted bodies and fractured bones of the whirlpool people Klein had seen before, these snail humans did indeed have large, tough snail shells growing on their backs. Two large snails twisted strangely in the restroom stall, seemingly unaware of Klein and the others' arrival. If things had only progressed this far, Furs would at most find it somewhat bizarre and horrifying, but when she saw the dense clusters of small pink balls appearing beneath the snail humans, she was completely stunned. These are. Anderson poked the small pink balls with a mop. Snails are oviparous animals. Although they are hermaphroditic, they cannot self-fertilize. He explained calmly, implying something. Furthermore, only male students should come here. Furs was utterly shocked. This. Klein murmured to himself, bizarre, truly bizarre. He needed to wash his eyes with tap water. He definitely needed to wash his eyes. Miskatonic University, are you trying to get yourself killed, designing examination content like this? By this point, Klein and Furs had recorded the third abnormal location, while Anderson had recorded the fourth. There were no immediate problems on the school side, there seemed to be no monsters that would chase people here. However, Klein was still quite cautious. After confirming that their respective tasks were completed, he decided to speed up their departure from here. While waiting for his mental strength to recover, Klein lightly touched the bracelet on his wrist with 12 strange segments, carefully flipping through his task prompts. Everlasting Love by the Sea, The Guiding Lighthouse, The Road Away from Home, The Strong Winds of Sphere Lake, The Underground Hiding All Secrets. Completing 2 of these would mean Klein had finished his examination question. But Klein's attention was fixed on the task description, Escape Black Vortex Town before disaster strikes. Escape Black Vortex Town. How is one considered to have escaped Black Vortex Town? From a geographical perspective, Black Vortex Town isn't large. Leaving here would inevitably lead to the abnormal location, the road away from home. According to conventional design logic, This type of road either encounters many dangers or is simply a ghost wall. Based on the characteristic of whirlpool in this examination area, the probability of the latter was quite high. And this is escaping Black Vortex Town spatially, which is the first approach. The second approach is that the concept of Black Vortex Town refers to the concept of whirlpool. In the field of ritual magic, symbolism is a very important concept. Whether it's the representation of 3 candles, the description of honorific names, or the design of incantations, they essentially utilize symbolism to obtain the help of the symbolic essence. Escaping the area covered by the concept of whirlpool should also be considered escaping Black Vortex Town. Between these two methods of clearing the stage, the scope of the latter is much larger than the spatially defined Black Vortex Town. Chapter 303, 302 Gale. Solving the problem of spiritual pollution on a concept level should be something that 2 class, or even 1 class ritualists would need to face. And the hints about the source of this pollution are actually quite obvious. Klein glanced at his feet. Who knew what chaotic things were hidden beneath this compacted earth? Whether it was the distorted station signs, the black smoke from burning people, or those snail people, whirlpool people, and now the strong winds and heavy rain, all these things originated from something underground. Did this thing truly exist? Klein couldn't help but think, if this thing existed and could cause the entire town to become abnormal, it must be something on the level of a 1 class sealed artifact, or even reach the level of a 0 class sealed artifact that could affect the world's structure, to be able to achieve such a large-scale anomaly and conceptual pollution. But no matter what it was, in short, it wasn't anything good. Klein also didn't think that he, a Sequence 9, could see through any problems or solve problems of this level. But if a Sequence 9 couldn't figure it out, why not try going above the gray fog? As soon as this thought popped into Klein's mind, his consciousness blurred for a moment. Neither Furs nor Anderson beside him noticed the black silk top hat that flashed across their teammates' eyes. The hat seemed to be holding something, and it gently placed itself on Klein's head. The idea of going above the gray fog and using the mysterious space above the gray fog to examine the core problem of this place was quickly dissuaded by rapidly surging thoughts such as, might be discovered by that Nicholas Flamel, there is clearly a great anomaly here, and cannot expose this point, as well as the secret that I am a transmigrator, for now, forming a self-consistent and seamless logic. Klein's consciousness was deceived, but he himself didn't realize it. He just didn't know why, but Klein always had an urge to pull something out of his pocket and put it in his right eye socket. Too strange. Finally, Klein still felt too awkward. He shook his inexplicably dizzy head and forced himself to ignore this somewhat strange thought. Nicola watched Tang leisurely swaying in a rocking chair, while pinching a monocle and secretly watching the live stream with the lazy system, and while holding a glass of happy fat house water in a goblet, swaying and appreciating it. Who was it before who kept saying, all monocles should die, and monocle phobia? Now he was quite enthusiastic about making others wear monocles. Tang. Hee. System. Hee. Nicola. Klein and his group braved the heavy rain and entered the streets of Black Vortex Town, where it was still pouring. They planned to go to the seaside, to the lighthouse, to check the situation before the anomaly of the entire Black Vortex Town reached a critical point, and clear the test as quickly as possible. But for some reason, the wind and rain, which had been getting smaller, had become so strong since the afternoon that Klein and the others felt like they would be blown away by the rain and wind. The wind was abnormally strong. A typhoon is coming. Klein's expression was not good. Furs, on the other hand, used her apprentice's door-opening ability to borrow a lot of food from other places and was currently gnawing on her lunch. They had to solve their own food and clothing problems. In this environment, unless they were sequences with extremely strong survival abilities that could function without eating, drinking, or defecating for a short period, hunger would lead to a decrease in their state and mental value, causing quite serious consequences. And this increasingly bad natural weather was an obstacle, both for the residents of Black Vortex Town and for them. There's a very strange sound coming from afar. Anderson looked outside at the rain, which was being blown by the wind like bullets hitting the walls and glass, and frowned. The way the sound is pronounced is very strange. It should be a variation of ancient Hermes, but the speaker doesn't sound like a human. This is like telling a ghost story. Furs complained weakly. She didn't know if her choice to hide in Tingen City after using that strange magical item and hearing the maddening whispers during the full moon, and then choosing to spend 50 gold pounds to sign up for this exam for the Tingen City Professional Ritualist subsidy, was the right one. But given the current situation, Furs felt that if she could, she would definitely write a novel with horror as the main theme. Putting everything else aside, the Black Vortex Town, this strange and uncomfortable examination hall with a touch of mysticism, really gave Furs a lot of writing inspiration. This was much more terrifying than the strange short stories Rosal the Great had written before. Well, it might also be because the information that can be conveyed and the sense of reality felt are different between text and audio. Furs couldn't help but mutter. And soon, Klein and the others heard clearly and knew where the strange sound Anderson mentioned came from. Outside the window, the sky was in turmoil. The sky, which they hadn't seen since entering here, at the horizon where it met the sea, a tiny but visible object, still constantly enlarging, was slowly moving towards them. Looking in that direction, Klein's gaze froze. Although he had a premonition that this day would eventually come, Klein still couldn't help but open his mouth wide. Neither he nor the original owner had ever seen such a scene except in television, newspapers, and book photos. It was a giant tornado at sea. Countless waves were rolling back and flying towards the sky, accompanied by the changes in the clouds. It was like the center of Black Vortex Town, a whirlpool that could swallow everything. Typhoon. That strange, noisy sound, fragmented by the wind, came from the typhoon that was slowly approaching them and looking bigger and bigger. The typhoon was about to make landfall. Inside the examination hall, on the third day, the typhoon made landfall in Black Vortex Town. In this terrible weather, even trees would be uprooted directly, and people simply couldn't go out. Klein and the others were forced to stay in the dilapidated house where they had rested on the first night, using ritual magic to prevent this house, which looked like it was about to collapse, from being blown away by this terrible weather. Now, neither people nor monsters were anywhere to be seen. Going out in this weather was just seeking death. Even monsters with low intelligence who only acted on instinct would definitely stay indoors based on the idea of seeking advantage and avoiding harm. But even in such weather, there were still people on the road. It was a very tall, slender woman wearing a black dress, a pointed hat, and with a pale, long face, who looked weightless. She held a black umbrella and strolled in the rain. Her slender body, from the side, was as thin as a piece of white paper, but neither the strong wind nor the heavy rain had wet even a corner of this woman's clothes. This lady, who was leisurely and aimlessly walking in the heavy rain, stared straight ahead, ignoring the strange noises constantly coming from both sides of the houses, and not looking at the distorted and deformed bodies of the whirlpool people and snail people reflected on the glass windows. The monsters confined in the houses were watching this lady, watching her disappear into the rain curtain, gradually moving further away under their gaze. Soon, this lady swayed past a dilapidated house. This ruined house looked precarious under the wind and rain, and there were no signs of anyone moving inside, but the lady holding the black umbrella uncharacteristically did not directly pass by this dilapidated house. Instead, she stopped in front of it. She stood there, seemingly looking around and searching for something. Then, the lady walking in the rain slowly approached the shattered glass, as if wanting to see what was inside. Separated by a layer of glass, Klein held his breath, looking at that thin, pale face, which looked like it was painted on. This face, combined with this background. Rain Lady. This name popped into Klein's mind. Furs and Anderson both saw the lady with the umbrella facing Klein, and they both came over. Furs subconsciously glanced at the areas of several ritual magic in the corner. The candles there had not gone out, and the ritual magic was still effective. Logically, they, who were in a hidden state, should not, and could not, have been discovered. This is something called a Rain Lady. Klein turned his head and looked at Anderson and Furs. This thing will follow pedestrians who appear in the rain and take out its umbrella to shield them from the wind and rain. Sounds like a good thing. Furs looked at the Rain Lady outside, whose face was as pale as a dead person's, her eyes slightly lowered, half open and half closed, and couldn't help but complain. Anyway, if she saw this thing holding an umbrella for her, she felt it would be best to run as far away as possible. No, Klein turned his neck stiffly and added, this thing is not a good thing either. It is a symbol of bad luck. As long as we encounter this thing and it follows us, our luck will keep getting worse. Things that are within reach will be lost due to accidents, monsters that could clearly be avoided will directly encounter us, and dangerous areas we didn't plan to go to will be entered prematurely due to various kinds of bad luck. This is a wandering monster with an 80% or higher chance of a party wipe as long as you encounter it. Klein rummaged through his mind for things that Pedigree and Tang had popularized to him in the more common, professional ritual magic level test. Monsters like the Rain Lady appear irregularly and randomly in various 3 inches class, 2 class, and 1 class examination halls. They are wandering monsters that appear in the examination halls, and their figures may be seen in multiple examination halls. And if you encounter them, according to the official explanation of the Miskatonic University Ritualist Qualification Certification Office, this monster itself is for balancing the difficulty and adjusting the pass rate. To put it simply, if your luck is too bad, and to maintain the pass rate, then just accept your bad luck. After all, in the extraordinary world, bad luck is truly bad luck. The Rain Lady's half-closed, half-open eyelids met Klein's gaze through a layer of broken glass for a long time. Then, she slowly walked back into the rain curtain, gradually moving away, as if going to other places. Klein heard Fur's sigh of relief. His heartbeat also involuntarily quickened. Klein always kept a distance from things that looked like people but weren't, and had a strong urban legend feel. But soon, he realized that the few of them had breathed a sigh of relief too early. Klein watched with his own eyes as another Rain Lady came from the direction the previous one had come from. She was still wearing the same clothes, had the same appearance, a pale face, and half-closed, half-open eyes. She held an umbrella and approached the seemingly empty house again, seemingly examining the inside. Furs suddenly called out in a low voice, "The burning speed of the candles in the corner is accelerating." Klein and Anderson quickly looked over. The candles supporting the operation of the ritual magic in the corner had been burning 3 or 4 times faster than usual since the appearance of the Rain Lady. Anderson suddenly turned his head again, looking at the extremely pale face of the Rain Lady, which was very close to the broken window outside. He said in a low voice, "This thing is also approaching. This new one is closer than the previous one." Klein's heart sank slightly. Is this definitely making us leave here? It should be. It's also a mechanism, like our growing hair. But going out in this weather was quite dangerous, and they couldn't guarantee that the Rain Lady wouldn't follow them and bring them bad luck after they went out. Soon, the Rain Lady, just like the previous time, slowly left the window, holding her umbrella, and disappeared into the end of the rain curtain. But immediately after, a third Rain Lady appeared. Following the actions of the previous 2 Rain Ladies, she still stopped when passing the dilapidated house, looked over, and brought her face close to the glass, examining the inside. In the corner, the candles used to maintain the ritual magic flared up again. This time, Klein saw that the Rain Lady's face was pressed tightly against the glass, and her eyelashes were clearly visible on her pale, half-closed, half-open eyelids. She extended her pale, thin, long hand, which was not holding an umbrella, and knocked on the damaged glass window. Go. The next moment, the candles used to support the ritual magic in the corner went out. The power of darkness and concealment disappeared. The Rain Lady outside the window seemed to have realized there was someone inside. Her figure passed through the wall of the house, holding her umbrella, and slowly walked into this house, which was still constantly dripping. Klein, Anderson, and Furs immediately jumped out of the other dilapidated window. Then, they encountered strong winds and were blown into the air, their bodies getting further and further away from the ground. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.